Chapter 1. Rust Creek Morning. Caleb Ward wiped the sweat from his brow, the Texas sun already pushing the morning to sweltering. He was hunched over the engine of an old Chevy pickup in his yard, grease-stained hands working the rusted bolts. The rhythmic clank of his tools filled the air, but something else tugged at his attention. A persistent humming, soft yet unrelenting, throbbed beneath the ground like the heartbeat of a restless beast. Every time he adjusted the oil filter, the noise would swell, a discordant echo that crept under his skin. He cursed under his breath, the hum forcing his concentration to splinter. It had become a familiar annoyance in recent days, an unseen irritant disrupting his work and rattling the radios around the yard. Just another day in Rust Creek, he muttered, but the irritation drummed at his mind. He picked up a multimeter, testing the battery he had just installed. The needle flickered erratically, a laughable mockery of its usual precision. Just like that hum, nothing seemed to hold steady anymore. Caleb rolled his shoulders back, trying to shake off the fatigue. Working day in and day out as a mechanic didn't leave much room for distractions, let alone strange sounds. But he couldn't dismiss it, not when the faint thrumming somehow resonated with the rhythm of the town's daily chaos. It lured him, an unsolved puzzle nagging at his instincts. He set the multimeter down with a decisive clang that echoed across the yard, the tool's metal body still resonating with the faint energy of the hum. "What in the world is going on?" he mumbled to himself, curiosity piquing. He felt a tug of determination swell within him, pushing aside the exhaustion that typically clung like a second skin. If this noise was coming from the south pasture, he had to know. It could very well be an electrical issue, some ancient line breaking beneath the soil, or a problem with one of the old ley lines that occasionally sparked odd happenings around the ranch. With one final glance at the pickup, he grabbed a crowbar and headed toward the direction of the noise. Each step sent an odd thrill through him, almost like the excitement of a rush job to fix a vintage car. Yet this felt different, as if each stride drew him closer to a secret hidden just beneath the surface. As he trudged through the thick, sun-baked grass, the hum grew louder, twisting and resonating like the chord of an unseen instrument. For a moment, Caleb paused, allowing the sound to seep into his bones. The sensation was unnerving yet exhilarating, and the weight of routine faded into the background. He had never felt compelled to wander beyond the ranch, but now, with each stride southward, determination pulsed in tandem with the bewildering hum. If he didn't investigate the source, he'd leave the issue hanging like a loose thread, something that could unravel at any moment and catch him off guard. "Guess it's time to find out what secrets you've been keeping," he said, resolve bolstering his voice as he pushed on. The farm and its mechanics could wait. Something fundamental was stirring out here, pulling him into the extraordinary. Caleb marked the path in his mind, a mental note of when he'd crossed from mundane mechanic work to adventure. He needed to figure this out, this hum that lingered like a ghost, marking the beginning of what he could only hope would be remarkable. As he neared the edge of the pasture, excitement thrummed alongside anxiety, a sharp reminder that there were still things unseen in the world, clues waiting to unfold. And with every step, he felt more like the man he had yet to become. The sun sank below the Texas horizon, casting long shadows across the worn pasture. Caleb Ward knelt beside a weathered oak, the persistent hum resonating beneath the earth, pulling at his curiosity like a child tugging on a parent's arm. He felt unease twist into a tangible urgency as he powered on his multimeter, the needle wavering, refusing to settle. It had flickered wildly all day. Now it merely buzzed with erratic energy, just like the ground beneath him. Coyotes' howls wafted through the air, unsettling the local fauna. A herd of deer rested nearby, their ears twitching, eyes wide with alarm. he caught hints of chaos. Insects scuttling for cover and birds, restless, flapped overhead, veering away from the oak. "What in the hell is going on?" he murmured, a crease forming over his brow. He fiddled with the probes, adjusting the settings, his breath hitching as he directed the multimeter toward the ground. Squatting closer, he traced the contours of the earth, half expecting the soil to ripple beneath his fingers. As he shifted, the hum rose and fell, sending vibrations through his bones. Caleb would be damned if he didn't figure this out. If the ranch was disrupted further, it'd put his entire business, and perhaps his life, at stake. The weight of uncertainty hung thick in the air. "Come on, just stabilize for once," he grumbled at the multimeter, jabbing the buttons as if it could hear him. The needle jounced again, teasing him with flickers that matched the pulsing hum. Frustration rolled through him as memories of his late father, who'd turned the ranch from a desolate property into a thriving shop, clawed at his thoughts. What did it matter if he was fixing cars if the ground underneath his feet was falling apart? Then, a sharp snort from behind pulled his focus. The doe turned to flee, and soon the others followed, their flight filling the pasture with flaring chaos, dashing into the thicket while Caleb's heart raced. "Easy, easy," he called, but it was too late. Whatever had scared them was in the air, threading through the deepening twilight. Determined, he snatched the crowbar from his side, its cold surface steadying his twitching nerves. He advanced toward the oak, where the hum seemed strongest, and scanned the ground. A shudder rippled through the earth, echoing against the bottom of his boots. "This isn't just some ordinary noise," he muttered, a thrill shooting through him as the hum swelled, becoming almost melodious. He dropped to his knees, prodding the soil with the crowbar, each scrape against the earth chipping away at layers of mystery. What if this wasn't just an annoyance? Maybe he was on the brink of uncovering something far greater, some revelation that could shift the tide of his small existence. With every shove of the crowbar, he felt the ground thrum in response, alive and waiting. Breath quickening, he found himself smiling at the potential for adventure. Something lifted in his chest, reminding him he was more than just a mechanic in a small town. The hum surged again, a powerful pulse that intensified. It called to him, a whisper of secrets waiting to be unearthed. He paused, sweat at his brow, and sensed he had reached a limit. With a determined squaring of his shoulders, he resolved to dig deeper. He marked the dig site with the stone, its jagged surface pale in the growing darkness. Tomorrow he would return, but for now he sensed that whatever lay beneath was ready to be uncovered, and that it might change everything. Chapter 2. The Hum in the Pasture. The moon hung low over the south pasture, its light spilling unevenly across the ground as Caleb Ward hefted his crowbar, its weight familiar in his grease-stained hands. The hum pulsated beneath him like a heartbeat, urgently beckoning him. He knelt beside the weathered oak, a sentinel amidst the scraggly mesquite. There was something deeply unsettling about the way the ground vibrated, whispering secrets only he seemed to hear. He drove the crowbar into the earth, grunting with effort as he tried to pry the stubborn soil apart. Each thrust sent a jolt through his arms, but it was more than mere dirt he contended with. The ground resisted, clinging to whatever lay buried beneath. "Come on, you hard-headed bastard," he muttered to himself, sweat trickling down his brow. The multimeter dangled from a clip on his belt, its needle flickering in erratic patterns as if it sensed the pulsating energy below. The hair prickled on his arms. Wild animals had fled the area. It was unsettling to see the deer avoid this part of the pasture, the birds circling distant as if knowing danger loomed nearby. With a sharp twist of his wrist, the crowbar broke through the surface, and the soil loosened, spilling away. As he dug deeper, A metallic clang echoed in the night, vibrating up through his bones. Caleb's breath hitched. He could feel the ground shudder beneath him, responding to his intrusion. Cautiously, he scraped away the final clumps of dirt, and there they lay. Corroded iron plates, half buried and etched with unfamiliar sigils. They glinted in the moonlight, dark and foreboding. Caleb's heart raced as he reached out, running his fingers over the markings, feeling a strange energy course through him that made the back of his neck prickle. He steadied himself, half expecting an explosion of light, but the energy was more subtle, a kind of low hum resonating against his palms. "What on earth?" he began, when a sudden jolt shot through the plates, arcing like a lightning strike right to his crowbar. The tool vibrated violently, and Caleb snatched it back just in time to avoid a shock that left the hair on his arm standing on end. A chill ran coursing down his spine. No, this can't be right. What have I uncovered? His pulse quickened as he recoiled, anxiety spiraling into a tight knot in his gut. If this was a mere artifact from some misplaced barn equipment, it was more than he had bargained for. Fearing what this could maybe mean for his ranch and Rust Creek, he forced himself to catch his breath. This wasn't just metal. He sensed a foreboding that twisted in the pit of his stomach. With every passing second, the hum grew louder, more insistent, nearly drowning out sound. It felt like it was alive, awakening in response to his presence. Caleb's gaze darted around, but there were only shadows and the distant rustle of leaves. Whatever he had disturbed was not safe to ignore. He couldn't turn back now. The stakes were too high. He needed to find out what lay beneath these plates, what connection it bore to the anomalies spreading across his land. Driven by urgency, he crouched low again, focused on the task at hand. Digging furiously, he channeled his determination into each swing of the crowbar, knowing that if he faltered, the consequences could spiral far beyond his comprehension. As the last clump of dirt fell away, a pulsing dark energy began to emanate from the exposed iron, thrumming and echoing against the night like a rallying call. Caleb's heart raced. A dawning realization hit him. Whatever was buried here wasn't just a remnant of some forgotten past. It was part of something bigger, something dangerous and otherworldly, and it was waking up. He steeled himself for whatever came next, the mixture of determined excitement and anxiety boiling over into something almost palpable. The hum intensified, and with it, his conviction hardened. He'd uncovered a gateway to the unknown, and whatever it meant, he would not face it alone. Caleb knelt beside the exposed iron plates, the rhythmic hum still thrumming in the ground, each pulse resonating against his fingertips. The strange energy surged with every beat, tingling through his crowbar, sending jolts down his spine. Sweat trickled down his brow as he fought the urge to retreat, the excitement of discovery battling the prickling fear rising in his chest. He pulled out a shop magnet from his pocket, his trusty multimeter clamped to his belt. If he could measure the oscillations, confirm what he suspected, perhaps he could contain whatever was awakening beneath the earth. As he positioned the magnet near the plates, there was a sharp snap. A burst of energy arced to his tool, lighting it up like a live wire. The shock made him jerk back. "Damn it," he muttered, heart racing. He steadied himself and checked the multimeter. The needle swung wildly, flickering like a frightened needle of a compass in blind panic. The electromagnetic pulses were chaotic, matching the distressed flaps of wings above him. Crows that had once perched nearby had taken flight, black against the darkening sky. Caleb's brow furrowed. This wasn't just an old relic. Whatever lay buried was active and unpredictable. He felt the air around him vibrate, thick with a sense of impending urgency. If this energy continued to escalate, it could become catastrophic, not just for him, but for all of Rust Creek. "I need to gather more tools," he said under his breath, his voice a mix of determination and anxiety. Caleb considered his careful approach, knowing he was flirting with chaos. He hadn't even fully grasped the nature of what he had exposed. Pulling the magnet back, he noticed how the hum intensified, rising like a crescendo of warnings in his bones. Everything in him screamed that he was standing at the precipice of a dangerous revelation. He turned, ready to head back to the shop, but the hum grew louder, a violent melody drumming in his ears that made his heart race faster. It felt like something was stirring beneath the surface, awakening from a long slumber, a hidden danger beckoning him to dig deeper. "Stop," he whispered to himself, the weight of anxiety settling in. But Caleb couldn't resist the call of the unknown, that pulsing energy promising answers to the anomalies plaguing his land. He took a deep breath, measuring each decision against the potential consequences. With burgeoning resolve, he clenched the crowbar tighter. It was time to dig again, to unearth whatever lay beneath those plates before it unraveled everything, a risk he could no longer ignore. As he prepared to resume digging, the ground seemed to thrum violently, the hum now more insistent, as if the buried artifact could sense his intentions. Urgent desperation rolled in his gut. He needed to act before it was too late. Chapter 3. First Contact. The ground trembled beneath Caleb's feet, a low and ominous growl vibrating through the earth. He tightened his grip on the crowbar, the cold metal familiar, but suddenly feeling inadequate against the disturbance that had haunted his dreams for days. The rhythmic hum from the south pasture had drawn him here, deeper and deeper into a ritual of unease. He had not anticipated this, a violent awakening. With a determination fueled by anxiety, he pried at the rusty latch on the ancient gate, the iron creaking in protest. The moment the last bit of metal gave way, the gate erupted with a flare of light, throwing him back. Shadows danced across the pasture as the gate swung wide, and from its depths, chaos spilled forth. Monsters emerged, Yukshin, their grotesque forms writhing like nightmares given flesh. He took an involuntary step back, heart thundering, but the instinct to protect his land drove him forward. Caleb raised his crowbar as two of the creatures snarled and lunged, all teeth and jagged claws, glimmering with a predatory hunger. "Get back!" he shouted, voice cracking. The words came out like a plea rather than a command. With a savage swing, he met the first Yukshin head-on, the crowbar crunching into its skull. It recoiled with a wail, but the second one was already upon him, diving low and swiping at his legs. He barely dodged the strike, feeling the rush of air as its claws missed him by inches. Caleb's gaze flickered to the gate, still gaping open, its presence rooted in the earth like a yawning mouth of peril. He could feel the energy pulsing, thrumming underfoot, a call to something greater and far more dangerous than the reality he had known. This was no longer about curiosity. This was about survival. Thinking quickly, he grabbed a handful of loose gravel and flung it into the creature's face, momentarily stunning it. He then turned, heart racing and breath heavy, rushing to the nearby toolbox where his multimeter lay. "Come on," he muttered, fumbling for a plan. Frantically, he twisted the knobs, hoping to find some reading amidst the chaos. The multimeter flickered erratically, its needle swinging wildly. The air around the gate itself shimmered with energy, mingling with the unmistakable scent of burning metal and fear. The hum intensified, almost mocking him, and he knew he was not alone in this fight. He had unwittingly awakened a threat that could consume him whole. With a grunt, Caleb swung the crowbar again, connecting solidly this time with the side of another Yukshin, and it yelped, snarling and backing off. But it was joined by more, I can't hold them all back. A knot tightened in his stomach. He could see the chaos spilling beyond the gate, shadows flickering into the sky like dark wings stretched against the light. And then, out of the flickering chaos, a figure emerged, tumbling through the gateway, a woman, slender with piercing green eyes, landing hard in a roll. Lyra, the battle mage engineer, crashed to the ground, collecting herself in a quick motion as she drew a ward from her satchel, her focus immediately sharp and fierce. "Get back!" she shouted, framing the scene with authority that immediately resonated with Caleb. As he caught his breath, a bolt of calm surged through him. They faced the monsters together. The first Yukshin lunged at Lyra, but she was quick, casting a barrier of light that swirled around her like a shield. It bounced off and fell, stunned. "I didn't think we'd be meeting like this," she called, a wry grin splitting her face, but the urgency in her voice was clear. "Neither did I," Caleb responded, slicing through the tension as the remaining Yukshin pressed forward, undeterred. "We've got to close that gate before more come through." Together, they funneled their focus into the fight, striking the Yukshin down one by one, but the sense of impending doom loomed larger than their victories. Every thud of a fallen monster echoed back toward the gate. The chaos was just beginning. Caleb realized that he was no longer the only one in danger. This was a conflict that had reached far beyond his pasture and into a world he hadn't fully understood. The flickering light of the gate beckoned, a nexus of untold possibilities and horrors both. As he fought alongside Lyra, the urgent realization hammered inside him. What lay beyond the iron gate was more than curiosity. It was a dark reality demanding reckoning, and they were just starting to uncover its weight. With both a grave sense of purpose and dread tightening his gut, he understood one truth clearer than ever. There would be no ignoring what he had awakened. He had to fight not just for himself and his land, but for the continued safety of Rust Creek. Caleb slammed the crowbar against the second Yukshin, sending it tumbling backward, its snarls swallowed by the chaos roiling in his head. The creature hit the ground hard, but another clawed form was already surging through the flaring light of the iron gate, driven by raw instinct. He could feel the pulse of the gate through the vibrations of the ground, a throbbing counterpoint to the metallic taste of fear in his mouth. "Look out!" Lyra shouted, her voice slicing through the din like a blade. She hurled a ward at an approaching beast, the sigil glowing brightly before exploding in a shower of sparks and light, stunning the creature momentarily. She turned to him, her green eyes blazing. "We need to fight them off together." "Together," he echoed, breathless, clenching his jaw against the tide of adrenaline rushing through him. The world had been normal minutes ago, and now it twisted into this surreal nightmare where he was suddenly a part of something much larger than himself. He swung the crowbar again, connecting with another Yukshin as it lunged for Lyra. The metal struck true, but the impact, jarring his arm, sent a shock of pain through him. As the creature screeched and staggered, Caleb barely registered how the sound mingled with his own rapid heartbeat. "Swing low," Lyra shouted, her hands reaching for another ward. She moved fluidly, her tattoos shimmering as she directed her energy toward the next creature barreling through the gate. "We can't let them overwhelm us. It's a swarm." Caleb ducked and pivoted, instinct driving him as he continued to fend off the beasts. Each attack was fueled by a grim determination to protect his land. The ranch, his family's legacy, echoed in every blow. If he failed, it wouldn't just be his life at stake, it would be Rust Creek's too. "More are coming," Lyra pressed, urgency lacing her voice. Her ward exploded again, scattering another pair of Yukshin as they rushed at him, twisting their supernatural heads to snap at the air. He felt the heat of her magic seep into the fight, and it bolstered his resolve. He wasn't alone anymore. "Keep pushing them back," he yelled, swinging the crowbar with newfound strength, each movement a defiance against the chaos. He nailed another Yukshin across the snout, and it howled, falling back. The gravity of their struggle sharpened his focus. This was no longer just about survival, it was about reclaiming control. Realizing they were establishing a rhythm between them, Caleb yelled over the din, "We need a plan! What if we push them back to the gate?" "I can seal it," Lyra called, determination igniting in her eyes, and he recognized the spark, the shared resolve. They were allies now, fighting not just to survive, but to contain this newfound menace. "Let's do it," he shouted, adrenaline surging through him. Suddenly, the unfamiliarity didn't feel so daunting. It felt like a chance. He swung again, this time using the momentum to gain ground. Together, they pushed forward, the crowd of Ukshin diminishing under their combined assault. Each creature that fell back sent a rush of hope through him, illuminating the fog of fear. He caught a glimpse of Lyra as she summoned another ward, her focus unwavering despite the danger. Their eyes locked for a split second, a silent understanding passing between them. Their survival depended on this emergent partnership. "I'll handle the gate," she declared, darting forward to form another protective barrier as Caleb swung the crowbar against the last few aggressive shapes rising from the portal's maw. The gate loomed, a chaotic force still buzzing with energy, but it was manageable now. "Then let's secure it before more get through." He fought with a furious precision he didn't know he possessed, pushing back the last of the beasts, defending their fragile line. As the last Yukshin fell, panting and momentarily defeated, they stepped back, breathless but alive. Caleb exhaled sharply, guilt and adrenaline cascading through him as he turned to Lyra. "We need to figure out how to seal that thing before it opens again." "Agreed," she replied, her voice steady but edged with urgency. "We can't let it be a gateway for more of those creatures." He nodded, every pulse of the gate now a reminder of what they faced. More than a threat, it was a ticking clock. "Let's make a plan before we deal with these things again," he said, urgency igniting a fire within him. No longer just an average mechanic, he felt a new direction pulling at him. As they crept closer to the flickering light of the iron gate, the weight of their task loomed ahead. They needed to understand this force, together. Chapter 4: Terms and Consequences. Lyra's heart raced as she crouched beside the faintly flickering iron gate, her mind racing even faster. She could feel the weight of urgency pressing against her chest, fueled by the remnants of battle and the knowledge that their window of action was closing as quickly as night fell over Rust Creek. The gate's shimmering edge pulsated, an uncontrolled, frantic heartbeat connecting two worlds, and she needed Caleb to understand that they had to move. Malric's nullstone engine, a foul creation that siphons magic, has forced our realms to the brink. If we don't shut the gate from my side, Yukshin will keep pouring through. More will come, and your town, she swallowed hard, your ranch will be a battleground. Caleb, still gripping the crowbar, shifted uneasily. The hard lines of his jaw tightened, shadowed under the moonlight filtering through the nearby oaks. His weathered face betrayed a mixture of skepticism and growing concern. "You're asking me to leave my home, Lyra. What if we get over there and it's worse than this? What if we can't come back? Every second we hesitate puts your world in danger. My magic is waning. Every moment counts." Lyra's voice trembled, not from fear, but from sheer determination. She couldn't let her own doubts shatter the resolve she needed. "If we seal the gate, it's not just about your safety, it's about restoring balance. If Malric controls the Nullstone, he'll enslave my people, and worse, they could come for you." "You're sure sealing it will stop the Yukshin?" Caleb pressed, his eyes narrowing. searching for cracks in her certainty. The flickering energy of the gate mirrored his conflicted thoughts, and she could see he was torn. I'm sure of it. It has to be me, Caleb. I hold the knowledge. My people understand where the ley lines run, how to channel the magic back through the gate. Her voice softened, pleading. But I need you to trust me, to help me get back, to face Malric. Together, we can do this. Caleb hesitated, his brow furrowing as he weighed the lives at stake against the undeniable fear of stepping through an unknown. In that moment, she caught a glimpse of his fear, of failing those who depended on him, of being the reason Rust Creek fell into chaos. I can't lose any more people, he said, gripping the crowbar tighter. I've seen enough of the cost of battling forces I can't entirely understand. And I've lost too many already. Lyra stepped closer, urgency igniting her words. We can't let fear dictate our choices, Caleb. If we fail to act now, there will be nothing left to protect. Suddenly, an harsh rumble tore through the night, shaking the ground beneath their feet. The iron gate shivered, its aura flickering more violently as if in response to their conversation. They both turned toward it, an unsettling brilliance illuminating the dark pasture. We don't have time! They're coming again! Caleb's face hardened with resolve, and she saw it, the moment he shifted from skepticism to commitment. Fine, let's do it. But if this goes sideways, we're both in deep trouble. Good, Lyra breathed, feeling the fierce determination returning. We cross, seal the gate, and then we'll find a way back. I promise. As they moved toward the gate, a cacophony of sounds erupted from beyond, roars and snarls that echoed through the night air, heralding the imminent threat that lurked just out of sight. Let's go, she urged, her voice steady, but her heart raced with an urgency she could hardly contain. With one last glance back at Rust Creek, they plunged into the shimmering light of the iron gate, ready to face whatever awaited them on the other side. Caleb stood beside the iron gate, its jagged edges glimmering under the moonlight. Shadows danced as the cool night breeze rustled the grass, and he clutched his crowbar like a lifeline. The churning energy emanating from the gate hummed through the air, pulling at his gut like a siren's call, yet fear gnawed at him. The memory of Ukshin prowling across his land held him back, a tight knot of dread tangled with the uncertainty of what lay beyond. Caleb, we don't have time. Lyra's voice pierced through the thickening tension, sharp as the crackle of arcane energy. Her green eyes glowed with urgency, reflecting the flickering light of the portal. If we don't seal this now, more will come. They're already coming. I know, he shot back, frustration flaring with each beat of his racing heart. But I don't know what's on the other side. What if we can't get back? Lyra stepped closer, pressed by the looming portal's thrum. You've seen what Malric's doing? You think you can just wait here? For Rust Creek to become a battlefield? Her tone softened for a moment, the urgency punctuated with an almost pleading edge. We have to stop this. Together. Each word felt like a weight on his shoulders, pulling him toward a choice steeped in fear. He swallowed hard, recalling the faces of his neighbors, the farmers, the children, innocent lives tethered to his decisions. If he hesitated, they would pay the price. What if I can't do it? What if something happens? Your courage comes from what you've already faced. You've survived worse, she urged, her intensity fierce. This is about more than us. It's about saving both worlds from Malric's tyranny. My magic is fading, Caleb. Every moment we delay. She paused, the urgency in her eyes shifting to something deeper, something more raw. Every moment we delay could cost all of us everything. His heart raced. He envisioned the ranch, the wide-open fields, the solace he'd always found beneath the Texas sky. But now, his home felt suffocating. I can't just leave, he murmured, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. You won't be leaving it behind, Lyra implored, her voice steady, soaked in conviction. You'll be fighting for it, fighting for all of us. Your skills, your heart, they matter more than you know. With you, I can seal the gate. Caleb's breath caught. Her words wrapped around his fears, squeezing tight but sparking an ember of resolve. He locked eyes with her, the world narrowing to this moment, this choice. So, it's now or never? Yes, she whispered, determination radiating from her. Now or never. In that heartbeat, the ground underfoot rumbled, the gate pulsating as if alive, sending ripples of electric anticipation shooting through the air. The earlier fight had proven that their world was fractured, and retreating into the shadows meant doom. He had felt the risk bloom, the monsters lurking at the edges waiting for permission to spill through. Caleb took a deep breath, tasting the crisp night air, each inhale steeling his nerves. I'm in, he declared, his voice firm. With a swift motion, he stepped forward, feeling the raw power of the gate pulse beneath his feet. He turned to Lyra, who stood ready with her satchel, relief washing over her face. They were both entering the unknown, yet the clarity of his purpose anchored him. He would not be alone. Together, she said, and they grasped hands, ready to face what lay beyond. He felt the tremor of the ground intensify, as if the very world reacted to their commitment. With one final look back at the silhouette of Rust Creek fading into the darkness, they crossed the threshold, the portal flaring to life behind them as the air grew electric with potential. A surge of energy enveloped them, and Caleb's heart raced, not just with fear, but with the exhilarating promise of what was to come. As the bright light of the gate swallowed them whole, the ground quaked once more, heralding the unleashed chaos from Elindor. Urgency propelled him onward, their mission now more vital than ever. Chapter 5. Crossing. Caleb stepped through the iron gate, and the world around him twisted violently. An intense wave of nausea surged through his body, winding tightly around his stomach like a runaway coil. The ground beneath him felt like thick fog, shifting and spiraling as his eyes raced to adjust. With a gasp, he gripped the edge of the frame, a cold iron surface humming with otherworldly energy as the last remnants of his familiar Texas ranch vanished behind him. Bright light burst from the gate, flooding his vision before he lurched forward, stumbling into the wild landscape of Elindor. Dark clouds loomed overhead, swirling violently as jagged mountains framed his new surroundings. The air was thick with a mix of damp earth and something acrid, like burnt metal. He could hear the crackle of magical disturbances in the distance, but disorientation robbed him of a clear grasp on his surroundings. Caleb staggered, heart racing, as the world steadied for a moment. Next to him, Lyra stumbled out of the gate, her slender form silhouetted against the energetic backdrop. She seemed to recover faster, her piercing green eyes scanning the horizon with a resolute glint that made Caleb's stomach churn again. They hadn't come this far just to be devoured by whatever threats awaited them. Caleb, focus! Lyra's voice sliced through the fog in his mind. We need to move. He clenched his jaw, fighting against the sickness that clawed at his throat. What about the... A guttural screech echoed through the air, sending a shiver down Caleb's spine. Shapes darted between the shadowed trees, creatures that twisted the laws of nature. Ukshin, the monsters he'd heard about, drawn to the energy of the gate like moths to flame. Their hungry, glinting eyes fixated on them. Get behind me, Lyra shouted, instinctively placing herself in front of him as Caleb forced his feet into motion. Forcing his mind to clear, he staggered after her, adrenaline racing to drown out the sickness. Caleb's fingers curled around the crowbar still clutched in his hand. He felt the weight of it like an anchor. If he could just hold it together long enough, they might stand a chance. He tried to breathe, to become more than a jumbled mess of fear and confusion. With a quick glance back, Caleb saw one of the monsters lunging from the underbrush, muscles rippling beneath its matted fur. Panic surged, and he swung the crowbar, feeling it connect with hardened flesh. The creature howled, retreating momentarily but clearly undeterred, a reminder that danger was paramount here. "Caleb, we can't stay exposed." Lyra's voice rose above the chaos, urgency pooling into his senses. Each heartbeat felt like a ticking clock, warning him that any falter in judgment could mean doom. Caleb took another shaky step, forcing his eyes to narrow into slits against the chaos. He began to assess their surroundings, seizing control over the disorientation that would render him useless. "Where do we go?" he asked, his voice grit-laced. "Follow me," Lyra urged, dashing toward a cluster of broken ruins ahead. They could make shelter, somewhere to regroup, and... Another shriek broke through the air, this one closer, more desperate. Caleb jolted, adrenaline surging through him like fire as he chased after her. If he didn't move, they'd be pinned down. As they pushed into the shadow of the crumbling structures, the air flickered with magical energy, sending goosebumps racing along his arms. He could see them now, more Yukshin emerging, their claws glinting in the dim light as they swarmed toward the gate, converging on its residual energy. Caleb's determination hardened. Fear was a tether he wouldn't allow to bind him. "This isn't like Rust Creek," he muttered to himself, bracing against the nearest wall. "This isn't home." But it was the first step into something larger, something state-shattering. A chance to prove himself if he could only hold on to that grit amid the unending chaos. The wilds of Elindor were ruthless, and both their lives depended on the choices made in this hostile reality. As the shadows grew longer and the first of the Yukshin clawed at the walls, Caleb drew a deep breath, ready to prepare for the storm they would now have to confront together. And with that thought came clarity. They weren't just fighting for survival. They had a mission to complete. But first, they needed to live long enough to find that hope amid the wrath of the unknown. The air shivered with energy, a bitter tang of ozone biting at Caleb's senses as he stumbled through the threshold of the iron gate. The nausea twisted his stomach into knots, the alien terrain a dizzying blur of jagged rocks and dark rolling clouds overhead. He blinked hard, trying to focus, but the world warped like a funhouse mirror. A sharp gasp pulled him into awareness. Lyra materialized behind him, her piercing green eyes scanning the horizon. She moved quickly, her slender form commanding urgency. "Caleb!" Her voice cut like a blade through the haze. "We need to go. Now!" Before he could reply, guttural growls echoed from the shadows, prickling the hairs on the back of his neck. Energy flickered in the air, drawing the unmistakable forms of Yukshin, feral, predatory creatures, their eyes glinting hungrily in the dim light. They surged forward, drawn by the residual energy of the gate, the air thick with the promise of violence. Caleb's heart raced. The pounding in his chest matched the thrumming energy that still clung to him from the crossing. He couldn't suppress a wave of panic. He was already slow, his limbs heavy with sickness, and the ground seemed to shift beneath his feet. The Yukshin were coming. "Caleb, move!" Lyra's sharp reprimand jolted him into motion. He followed her instinctively, though his body protested every step. Disoriented, he stumbled, tilting dangerously toward the rough ground, his crowbar slipping from his grip. Lyra darted ahead, positioning herself against a crumbling stone wall that jutted out like a protective shield. "This way!" The urgency in her tone propelled him forward, and he forced his legs to answer the command, each step a battle against the vertigo-induced dizziness that threatened to consume him. As they reached the ruins, the first Ukshan lunged, snarling. Caleb barely steadied himself in time, his crowbar now clutched tight in his hands. Desperation fueled him as he swung, the metal arc slicing through the air and crashing against the creature's skull. It recoiled with a yelp, but before he could catch his breath, more poured from the shadows, a relentless tide of hunger and chaos. "Caleb, behind you!" Lyra shouted, her voice firm and commanding. He turned just in time to intercept another charging beast, feeling the vibrations of impact rattle through his arms. The creature staggered, but didn't go down. With adrenaline firing through him, Caleb rallied the remnants of his focus, forcing aside the bleak nausea. "I can't keep this up," he shouted, gritting his teeth as he sidestepped yet another attack. "The ruins can shield us. Fall back," Lyra commanded, and he saw the determination carved into her features. She was right. Those fragments of stone offered at least a chance to regroup. They slipped behind the fractured wall, breathless, exposed yet shielded momentarily. The growls of the Yukshan filled the air, a chilling reminder of their precarious situation. Caleb leaned against the wall, trying to steady his racing heart as he looked to Lyra. "What's the plan?" "Regain your footing." Her voice was a rush of urgency, but he noticed the flicker of trust in her gaze. "When they close in, I'll cover you. Just focus on the next move." The chaos heightened his senses, the thrill of survival sparking clarity amidst the nausea. He nodded, determination igniting in his chest. "Okay." With a quick breath, he peered around the edge of the wall. The Yukshan prowled closer, flipping from shadow to shadow, eager for any sign of weakness. "We hit them together," he decided, steadied by the realization that they were in this together. "You ready?" Lyra asked, a hint of a smile breaking through her intense focus. "Let's show them what we've got." As they steeled themselves, the air thick with tension, Caleb felt the disorientation start to ebb, replaced by the clarity of purpose. Together, they would fight against this chaotic welcome to Elindor. They had each other now, and that made all the difference. Chapter 6. Way Station. Caleb squinted at the water pump's rusted shell, the midday sun glaring down like a judgmental overseer. He wiped his grease-stained hands on his already dirty jeans, his heart thumping as he knelt before it. This piece of machinery was everyone's lifeline in this dying way station, and their skeptical gazes made sure he felt the weight of every eye. He could almost hear whispers seep through the air. The locals were not convinced he belonged here. Taking a deep breath, he examined the pump, its metal body corroded and weathered. The main valve was stuck, and vital components were clearly missing. He could replace them, but first, he had to free the valve. He pulled out his well-worn toolbox, noting the assortment of rusty tools so unlike those back home. Still, he wasn't about to let that stop him. He was used to jury-rigging under pressure. "How long do we wait?" a voice grumbled from the edge of the group. A bearded man crossed his arms over his chest, peering at Caleb like he was a fly in his whiskey. Caleb resisted the urge to snap back. He couldn't afford friction right now, not when every minute counted. "Just a moment," Caleb said, trying for confidence that he didn't fully feel. He fished through his toolbox for a wrench, finding one that fit the valve but was loose from years of neglect. As he worked, he encountered the obstacle, the rust. The valve groaned in protest as he turned the wrench, the metal groaning in discord with his efforts. He grunted and rested it again, pumping the handle in a rhythm that echoed faintly the 60 hertz hum from his ranch, the memory of it buzzing in his mind. He felt the teens watching his every move, their skepticism palpable. If he failed to get this pump working, They wouldn't just lose water, they would lose faith in the kind of help a mechanic from across the portal could offer. The very fabric of his mission was caught in the balance. After a few more minutes of twisting and wrenching, he decided to take a risk. He raised the crowbar and delivered a decisive blow to the valve's top, a move reminiscent of the brute force repairs back home that often worked wonders. With a resounding clang, it broke free, and water spouted out in a shameful spray, splashing everyone nearby. Laughter rippled through the gathered crowd, breaking some of the tension. Caleb beamed despite the soaking, feeling a flicker of connection. "You've got to encourage the stubborn ones," he quipped, wiping a few water droplets from his face. The man who'd questioned him earlier stepped closer, one brow arched. "Not bad for a foreigner." Caleb smiled, tension lifting off his shoulders as he guided water back into the pump. Hand over hand, he tightened fittings and reconnected hoses, each movement earning him tentative nods. With one final push, he gripped the handle and pulled. Water gushed smoothly from the pump, a steady stream filling the cistern nearby. Cheers erupted from the onlookers, a whirlwind of relief washing over the group. Caleb straightened, pride bubbling warmly inside him. He wasn't just a stranger anymore. He had become a part of something, if only for a moment. "Thank you," a woman murmured, stepping forward. She was older, her weathered hands extending toward him as if he had forged gold out of the rust. "We'll need keepers like you for what's coming. Malric's scouts are near." As dread knitted his stomach, Caleb met her gaze, seeing the weight of her words settle in the small crowd. "I'll be ready," he replied, the spark of duty igniting within him once more. Caleb had gained more than just their trust. He was becoming an ally. The mechanical solutions he had fought so hard to prove could support them, blending with their magic like connectors in a circuit. But danger loomed closer, and with the elder's warning, tension seized him once again. He pinned the rusty tools in his belt, adrenaline surging. In preparation for the storm ahead, he would ensure he could withstand whatever came next. Caleb squatted beside the weathered table in the way station, the light from a flickering lantern casting a warm glow over the cracked surface. He leaned forward, studying the lay maps strewn across its surface as if they were schematics for an engine. Lines crisscrossed, dotted with annotations that shimmered subtly as Lyra traced her finger along them. The air around them thrummed with tension. Malric's scouts drew closer, each beat of Caleb's heart sinking with the hum of worry gnawing at him. "Focus, Caleb," Lyra urged, her voice both firm and low, underscoring the urgency that hung in the air. "The ley lines are crucial. If we can calibrate your technology to respond to these paths of magic, we can defend the way station." He looked up at her, the way her piercing green eyes gleamed, filled with desperation and strength. The urgency in her tone stoked the flame of determination in his chest, pushing away the creeping self-doubt. "I need to see how this all connects. Magic, it's all about flow, just like the circuits I work with. Where's the connection?" "Here," she said, pointing to a confluence of lines resembling a web. "It's a ley nexus. The energy converges here but gets disrupted by Malric's nullstone engine. We can use this to channel power for a ward, but only if your generator can tap into it." Caleb's brow furrowed as he stared at the intricate patterns. "Ley lines are like paths of current. If the signals can sync with how I typically hook up wiring, we could reinforce the ward's strength." "Exactly, but we need to avoid any resonances with nullstone. That stuff," she broke off, her lips pressing into a line, "it could fry your electronics if we're not careful." His fingers drummed against the table, igniting sparks of inspiration. "What if," he proposed, excitement rising in his voice, "I configure the generator to create a harmonic resonance? Could it stabilize the flow? I mean, if I rely on the rhythms of the ley lines, I could align my power system without interference." Lyra's expression shifted, admiration threading through the urgency in her eyes. You're actually understanding it. Yes, if we get your generator working in concert with the ley nexus, we might throw a spike of energy that could mask our presence from Malric's scouts. Just then, a low growl rumbled from the forest outside, snapping Caleb's focus back to the looming danger. He felt a rush of adrenaline at the imminent threat. They didn't have the luxury of time. Every moment spent pondering the maps was a moment closer to discovery and possible slaughter. As if sensing the pressure, Lyra leaned in closer, her voice fierce but steadied. Listen, we can't let fear win. Your skills matter here, Caleb. They can shift the balance. Trust in what you can do. Her confidence washed over him, broadening his sense of purpose. He straightened, a newfound resolve illuminating his determination. This wasn't just about survival, it was about collaboration. Tech and magic could meld like gears in an engine, and he could steer it. Let's get to work, he said, snatching tools from his toolbox with renewed vigor. We'll create something that works for both of us. All right. Lyra returned to the map, marking a few lay points with nimble precision. What we need first is... A thunderous crash echoed from the forest, interrupting their focus. The urgent growl morphed into a chaotic chorus, promising that Malric's scouts had come, drawn by the energy spike they dared to conjure. No time, Caleb shouted, adrenaline surging through his veins. We've got to do this now or we're out of time. He focused on the maps, pulling confident but concise measurements as he worked. Each calculated move melded magic with mechanics, and with the crunch of leaves outside, the dawning realization settled within him. This was a battle that could only be won if they fused their strengths, becoming greater than the sum of their parts. Together, he muttered to himself, matching the rising pulse of the ley lines with the crackling energy of his thoughts. The moment felt like a spark, igniting the path forward, a synergy between his world and hers, a promise of what could be executed under the star-lit chaos now brewing outside. The urge to fight was rising, and the need to protect the way station poured through him with a heat that transformed fear into action. Caleb knew what he had to do. They would turn this place into a fortress, and no one would topple it as long as they combined their skills. Fists clenched, he turned to Lyra, ready for the next charge to come. Chapter 7. Trial by Camp. Lyra stood at the fringes of the rebel camp, tension rolling off her in waves. The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows across a motley of weary, suspicious faces. Captain Dorn crossed his arms, his skeptical gaze fixed on Caleb as he rolled under a low tarp draped with errant coils of copper wire and an assortment of strange Elindor tech, barely familiar to him. Why should we trust an outsider? Dorn's voice carried, piercing the air like a knife. You've seen the ravage of Malric's forces. What makes you think this mechanic can help us fend them off? Caleb stood beside a sputtering contraption, sweat beading on his brow. Because I can fix this, he called back, holding up a rusted actuator from an ancient ward. You need power. I can merge our tech with the ley nexus. Just give me a chance. Lyra felt a tightness in her chest. This was a critical moment for Caleb, and the stakes were high. He was under pressure, and his unfamiliarity with Elindor's technology only added layers of complexity. She stepped closer, her heart pounding with encouragement and anxiety. Give him a chance, Dorn, she said, her voice unwavering. He's been able to adapt his skills when it mattered. The captain hesitated, eyeing Caleb as if he were a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. You have 15 minutes before the Yukshin are upon us again. Show me something useful, or you'll be on your own. Caleb nodded, determination flaring in his eyes. He bent over the mechanism, tracing his fingers over the components. His mind raced, a whirlwind of schematics and improvised solutions swirling within. He thought of the way the ley lines conjoined, of circuits he had drawn countless times during quiet moments in his workshop back in Rust Creek. Okay, he murmured to himself, pulling tools from his belt. The grove outside felt alive with the impending threat, and he focused on the task at hand. This works like a circuit. We can feed energy from the generator directly into the ley nexus, power the ward, he said more audibly, recalibrating his understanding. The rebels watched, their expressions a mix of curiosity and doubt. Minutes ticked away. Lyra knelt beside him, her fingers scraping over the map they had spread earlier. If you wire this to align with the ley patterns... Suddenly, a howl echoed from the tree line, sending icy dread creeping over the camp. Caleb felt the weight of their hopes settle on his shoulders. He was their lifeline, fragile and fleeting. "Caleb, we don't have time," Lyra urged, the urgency evident in her voice. "You need to connect the generator now." With a deep breath, Caleb tightened his grip on a rusted coupling just as its worn surface sparked under his touch. The ley flow was responsive. He knew the hum, the rhythm, the way it pulsed. He raced to align it, feeling almost like he was tuning an old radio. The mechanism sprang to life with a sickly sputter, just as the growls multiplied outside the camp. Instantly, the atmosphere shifted. It was no longer just about proving himself, but about survival. "Now!" he shouted as he flipped the last switch. With a triumphant whir, light burst from the ward, shimmering like liquid silver across the camp. A barrier flickered to life, casting a protective glow in a radius around them. Caleb's heart soared. He could feel the moments of doubt washing away, replaced by the realization that he could fuse his world with this one. Lyra's expression shifted from anxious worry to proud relief. "You did it!" she exclaimed, her voice breaking through the cacophony of the crowd. Caleb turned, ready to bask in the moment of victory, but the war cries of Ukshin drew ever closer. They wouldn't be safe for long. "We need a plan," Lyra urged, urgency returning to her tone. Caleb nodded, adrenaline flooding him as he felt the camp's dynamics shift around him. Acceptance flickered in the eyes of the rebels, tempered by the grim reality they now faced. "We'll need to fortify the positions, concentrate our defenses," he began, energy surging within him. Together, they would carve a path through the chaos, one that melded both the engineering he knew and the magic that was slipping away. As the sounds of the approaching Yukshin mingled with the crackle of protective wards, Caleb clasped Lyra's hand, a silent pact. They would not just endure this trial, they would shape their own destiny. Caleb hoisted himself onto the workbench, glancing at the rustic old generator he'd jury-rigged. Its brass fittings, exposed wires, and humming heart felt strangely alive, much like him, teetering on the edge of an improbable resurgence. The camp was expecting him to provide a miracle. The Yukshin were expecting blood. "Okay, you piece of scrap," he muttered to the machine as Captain Dorn's voice echoed in his mind. "You've got 15 minutes, Ward. Make it count." Caleb wiped the sweat from his brow, his palms slick with grease as he sat down, positioning the multimeter by the generator. It flickered erratically. That was promising. The ward's barrier was critical, but it had to withstand the incoming wave of energy-sensitive Yukshin. As the seconds ticked by, he could feel that unshakable weight of skepticism from the rebel camp pressing in. These people had doubts carved into their faces. Their survival depended on a mechanic from Texas, and the stakes couldn't be higher. "Caleb, what's the projection?" Lyra's voice broke through the fog of his thoughts, her green eyes fixed on him, filled with equal measures of hope and urgency. Just give me a second, Lyra." He felt that familiar pulse rhythm from the hum back on the ranch echo in his veins, aligning with the ley dynamics he'd witnessed here in Elendor. It guided him as he adjusted the generator's gears, aligning them to resonate with the energetic fabric around them. He flinched as a fierce roar erupted from the woods. The Yukshin. They were coming. The hairs on the back of his neck prickled with adrenaline, but he shoved his anxiety deep, focusing on the task at hand. "I need you to hold that lay connector steady," he instructed, nodding toward a section where the energy flow would converge. Lyra took her place beside him, her tattooed sigils gleaming with barely suppressed magic. "I'll cover you," she said, wielding her defensive wards in her other hand. "You focus on the generator." His pulse quickened further as she moved, and he caught a glimpse of her, a battle mage, confident and resolute, even under the weight of this newly formed bond. That steadiness inspired him. He adjusted the wires, linking the generator to the lay nexus with quick, deliberate motions. Another roar ripped through the air, closer this time. They had only moments left. "Come on," Caleb growled, dread knotting in his stomach. If he failed now, they'd all be overrun, and the distrust would take root again. He pressed the ignition, praying the relic wouldn't fizzle out. A spark, then. Light. Bright, golden arcs erupted from the generator, flooding the camp perimeter. The wards sprang to life, ethereal energy coiling around them like a protective shield. "It's working!" Lyra shouted, eyes wide, filling him with a surge of affirmation. The barrier thrummed with a vibrant energy that seemed to vibrate in sync with the hum that had been haunting his ranch. But even as they celebrated, the dense shadows in the trees began to shift. The Yukshin were drawn to the rising energy signature. "Caleb, they see it!" Lyra called, urgency flaring in her voice. Without thinking, he bolted into action. "We still need a plan for when the barrier breaks. We can't just sit here." The rebels began to murmur, their skepticism evaporating into wary anticipation, but the Yukshin were relentless. Preparing for their impending rush, he felt the weight of every single rebel watching him again, waiting for his next move. "Lyra, can you weave another barrier alongside this?" he shouted over the rising din. "Do you trust me?" she shot back, wild determination flashing in her eyes. "Are you kidding me? You're the one with the magic." He couldn't let this moment fester, not when it could turn into doubt again. "Just do it." As she nodded, they both rallied their combined focus, energy humming through them. In that heartbeat, trust ignited. Darkness couldn't snuff it out. He knew the hybrid defense could hold, but now they needed to solidify it as a tangible plan, an arsenal against the incoming tide. The sound of the Yukshin, a chorus of monstrous howls, crescendoed as they barreled closer, the resolve in Caleb's heart fueled by the knowledge that they could fight back, together. "Let's prepare for the next wave," he warned, locking eyes with Lyra. They breathed in sync, tension melding into woven determination. They were ready. "Together," she said, and without truly knowing if they could withstand this next assault, he replied with a fervent nod as the first Yukshin surged from the trees. The ward thrummed with power, buying them time, but the fight was far from over. Chapter 8. Heat Signature. Lyra stood at the center of the rebel camp, her heart racing as she scanned the tension in Captain Dorn's eyes. The warm glow from the ward they'd recently restored pulsed like a heartbeat, but the potential it had unleashed was drawing unwanted attention. She fought the urge to shift her weight, a flash of uncertainty creeping in as she faced a man whose duty was to guard lives with iron certainty. "Dorn, we need to fortify our defenses. The Yukshin will be here any minute," she urged, keeping her voice steady despite the surge of anxiety that washed over her. The darkened woods surrounding them had become a suffocating veil, hiding the danger lurking within. "The ward may keep them at bay for now," Dorn replied, crossing his arms, his expression unreadable. But relying solely on this hybrid defense is reckless. What we need is a solid line of archers, spears, real military tactics. Not that contraption. Real tactics? Lyra snapped, her frustration building. Your old ways won't hold against creatures drawn directly to our energy. We just proved that. I'd rather work with what we have than risk getting overrun in chaos. Dorn's brow furrowed, skepticism etched across his face. Do you really think Caleb's quick fix will stand against Malric's forces? We can't rely on the whims of magic or machinery in a fight. That's a losing battle. Caleb's understanding of ley currents saved us. His intuition is the only reason we're standing here, she shot back, glancing over to where Caleb was busy tinkering with additional defenses. You saw it work. The balance between technology and magic can hold. We just need to believe in it. Collaborate. Believe? Dorn interrupted, incredulous. In the heat of battle, belief won't save lives. Tradition has its... Before he could finish, a deep howl echoed through the trees, silencing their argument as if calling forth the very darkness that loomed beyond. The sound sent shivers up her spine. The Yukshin were drawing near, and with each passing moment, the stakes climbed higher. Lyra's eyes locked onto Dorn's. We don't have time for this. If you want to protect our people, we must prepare now. I need your support to implement my strategy and combine our strengths before it's too late. Dorn hesitated, inner conflict playing out in the lines of his weathered face. She could see that the instinct to protect clashed with the stubbornness that had defined his leadership. But here, in the heartbeat of impending doom, she could also see it was a moment that might shift him, a crack in the armor of his steadfastness. Fine, he conceded, his voice low but firm. Let's see your strategy in action. But if it fails, the blame will fall on your shoulders. Her heart surged with a mix of relief and determination, the slightest crack of a smile breaking through as she nodded. Then let's make sure it doesn't. We'll set traps, modify the wards, and leverage the ley nexus. If we work together, we can withstand this assault. As she glanced back toward Caleb, resolute in their makeshift defenses, another howl rippled through the air. Closer this time, a reminder that the windows of safety were rapidly closing. Lyra's mind raced. They had to finalize their plans before the Yukshin descended. Let's rally the others, she urged, a fire igniting in her veins. This is just the beginning. With a little faith in our unorthodox method, we might just survive this. Together, they turned, ready to bend tradition to their will as the shadows deepened and the howls grew louder, signaling the arrival of their foes. But this time, they would face it as one. As they moved through the camp, each step resonated with urgency, and the stakes had never felt more real. Caleb crouched behind the remnants of a crumbling stone wall, its jagged edges still warm from the recent sun. The air was thick with tension. He could hear the growls of the Yukshin drawing closer, their predatory howls echoing through the trees surrounding the rebel camp. He gripped his multimeter tightly, flicking its screen as if expecting the familiar erratic dance of readings to somehow guide him through the chaos. Lyra, he whispered, his voice barely slicing through the fevered anticipation, we'll need to cut the lights before they pin us down. Can you hold them back? The battle maid shifted beside him, her emerald eyes scanning the darkening forest. If we can black out the camp, we might confuse them long enough to escape. But we have little time. Caleb's heart raced. He could sense the urgency in the air, a palpable pressure that matched the proximity of the Yukshin. They had set up temporary defenses, but now he saw their value shifting from a solid perimeter to a desperate barricade. They'll go for the energy signature the ward created. If I can cut power to the camp. He let the thought trail off, focusing instead on the tools at hand, hungry for a plan. He recalled the generator they'd restored, and laced to the ley nexus, weak but functional. If he could get that humming just right, it could starve the ward and bring everything into darkness. He breathed in, the earthy scent of damp soil and rust lingering in his nostrils, and began to move. "Cover my back," he told Lyra, slipping along the shadows. Her nod was brief but fierce, the instinct of a warrior honed in a world ravaged by malice. She stepped into position, ready to unleash her magic should the need arise. Caleb stumbled awkwardly toward the generator, each step swift but measured. The sound of Ukshan feet scraping against the forest floor fueled both determination and fear. He had only seconds before they turned predator to prey. As he reached the device, he could see its wires frayed and aged, whispering memories of old power. He fumbled to disconnect the power from the ward interface without losing their light entirely. It felt like unspooling a thread from a delicate tapestry, fragile with the promise of security. "Come on," he murmured, twisting the generator's dials. The hum of the machine deepened, sending vibrations through his fingertips, resonating with the plants at his feet. But then, a flicker in the air, and he felt it, a disturbance like a cold shiver. Panic trickled into his veins. Had he miscalibrated? "Caleb!" Lyra's voice sliced through the haze. He glanced back just in time to see her unleash a ward, its silver glow providing brief sanctuary as Ukshan silhouettes slinked closer. Grinding his teeth, he dug into his toolbox, yanking out a shop magnet. A daring idea crystallized in his mind. If he could use the law of resonance, maybe he could sink this thing right. He hurled the magnet across the ground, letting it bounce close enough to the generator to trigger a burst of energy. To his relief, an arc shot from the exposed wires. The blackout mechanism engaged, plunging the camp into darkness. The air grew thick with the scent of ozone as the ward flickered and died. Lyra's breath caught. She moved instinctively to cover him as he glanced around, seeing the Ukshian veering away from their previous direction, lost in the dark. "We did it! We actually—" "Shh," she hissed, pressing her finger to her lips. "They might have heard that. Move!" Caleb slammed the final switch to disable the entire layout of lights as he hurried back to Lyra. His heart thudded loudly in his chest, filled with exhilaration and fear, still leading into the unknown. He caught Lyra's gaze, a flicker of something unspoken between them. Gratitude? Trust? He could take any of it now. "Let's regroup. We need a defense strategy before they figure out how to track us in the dark." With a newfound sense of purpose, Caleb felt the weight of their plan ignite an energy within him. The night was darker now, but he thrived in the shadows. He was no longer merely reacting to the chaos. He was right in its tangled heart, ready to defend the flickering light of another chance. "Together," he murmured as they moved, firmly believing they could devise a layering strategy strong enough to withstand whatever came next. Chapter 9. Map of Doors. Lyra stood near the makeshift table in the rebel camp, the dim light cast by flickering mage lamps illuminating the hastily drawn sketches of the Iron Gate Protocol. Dark circles hung beneath her green eyes, remnants of long nights fighting both Malric's oppressive forces and the dwindling magic of her world. She could feel the weight of both realities pressing down on her. "Caleb," she started, her voice steady despite the urgency gnawing at her gut. "The Iron Gate Protocol is our only chance. It requires two keys, Earth and Ether, to function." She leaned closer, eyes narrowing as she searched his face for understanding. "We need to ensure Malric's Nullstone engine doesn't suppress the magic we depend on." Caleb crossed his arms, a flicker of skepticism creeping into his weathered expression. "I don't know, Lyra. For someone who's quick to throw a ward or two around, it sounds mighty risky. What's to say we don't end up sealing ourselves instead of the gates?" The intensity radiating from her made his stomach tighten. If we fail to secure the protocol and understand how the Nullstone engine operates, both our worlds remain at risk of collapse. Her words hung in the air, but the visible doubts on his face twisted her stomach into knots. Magic hasn't been reliable for ages, he replied, pushing back against her fervor. Can't we find some other way? Your whole world is falling apart, but you want to gamble on a plan that's missing half the pieces. Connection sparked in her chest like a live wire. There are no other ways, Caleb, she snapped, frustration bubbling. This is what we have. If we refuse to act, we doom everyone. He shifted uncomfortably, the stocky Texan mechanic grappling with her fervor. Caleb had always thrived on logic and pragmatism. His hands ran through his greasy hair, a tell for his inner conflict. I get that, he said, softer now, but trusting a fading magic to fix a mess only magic can create seems foolish. Lyra clenched her jaw, feeling her optimism twist under the weight of his skepticism. I'm not asking for blind faith. I need you to look at this logically. Listen to what we know about the Nullstone engine. If we can override it from Elindor, we stand a chance to bring balance back to both our worlds. The air throbbed with tension, electric and acrid, like the moments before a storm. But as she watched him process her words, she could sense something shifting within him. He stepped closer, his brows knitted in thought, the gears of his mind visibly turning. You really think this plan could work? Yes, she replied, a blend of guarded optimism and determination crawling into her voice. We can combine your mechanical savvy with my magical knowledge. Before she could elaborate, distant sounds of movement snapped them both back to the present, a low growl. The ambient hum of tension grew heavier. She felt the weight of their situation close in. Malric's scouts are closer than we thought, she whispered, urgency pitching her voice higher. If we don't act now, our chance could slip away. Caleb's expression hardened, the skepticism waning, replaced by focus. All right, he said, a new resolve forming in his tone. Let's gather what we need and prepare. They moved as if choreographed by an unseen force, gathering supplies and coordinating their next steps under the looming threat. The air felt charged, a mix of desperation and determination pushing them forward. As they stepped out of the dim confines of the rebel camp, Lyra felt the urgency settle into a heavier responsibility. She met Caleb's gaze, and in that moment, she felt a flicker of hope. They were on the cusp of something monumental, yet still shadowed by the risks they faced. It would take all they had to successfully navigate the intersection of magic and machinery. They sprinted into the night, anticipation skewering them, knowing that the stakes had grown perilous. Malric's reach was closing in, relentless and cold, but they had each other, and that might be enough to turn the tide. Caleb knelt on the rough-hewn floor of the way station, sweat trickling down his brow. A half-assembled generator sprawled before him. Lyra paced nearby, her sharp green eyes darting to the door, tension radiating off her like heat from the forge. With every glance, Caleb could sense the pressure building, not just from her scrutiny, but from the unseen threat of Malric's scouts closing in. What if it doesn't work? He asked, fingers hesitating over the wires. What if I don't have what it takes to fix this? The echo of doubt lingered in his voice as he forced himself to focus on the task in front of him. But his unease tangled with the humming tension in the air. Lyra halted, turning to face him with an intensity that pulled him from his spiraling thoughts. Caleb, you have to understand, this isn't just magic and mechanics. The Iron Gate Protocol needs you. Without both Earth and Ether keys, we're dead. The urgency in her words sent a chill through him. Every piece of doubt magnified under her fierce gaze. Do you really think I can manage alongside you? With no experience in magic? Just a mechanic from Texas? His hands trembled slightly over the crude circuit, half-connecting coils that felt both alien and familiar. "It's not about magic," she snapped, sharp as a dagger. "It's about knowing how to fix things, how to read a system. This is your world, and we're running out of time." She stepped closer, her stance steadying as she pressed a hand against the table where the generator lay. "Malric's nullstone engine siphons magic. It's the very reason I came through the gate in the first place. But if we can't synchronize the two keys, then we risk losing everything." Caleb stared back, caught in a web of her conviction. The weight of the endeavor loomed larger than the floundering tension inside him. The collapse of two worlds depended on their success. He grasped a copper wire, the cool metal grounding him momentarily. "So, we need to gather supplies?" There was a tremor in his tone, but resolve began to lace through the uncertainty, heart hammering with the gravity of it all. "Yes, quickly," Lyra encouraged, and though she still wore an armor of urgency, Caleb thought he caught a glimmer of faith in her eyes, an acknowledgement that he mattered in this moment. As he moved to gather the components from the scattered tools, a guttural growl echoed from outside, close enough for the hairs on his neck to stand on end. "We should have set out already." "Keep moving," she urged, her intensity melting into a shared purpose. "We're in this together. You'll help lead the charge." Caleb's heart raced, breathing in the weight of her words, suddenly feeling less like a mere mechanic and more a crucial piece in this raging clock. "Right, together," he echoed, a slow determination hardening in his core. He would fight for both worlds and for her. "Gather what you can, and let's move," Lyra insisted, glancing back at the door, her face set with steely resolve. "We don't have long before Malric's scouts discover us." Caleb's pulse quickened as the growls intensified, fear prickling at the edges of his mind. This was it, the threshold to a larger role than he had ever envisioned. He straightened, a newfound urgency propelling him through the rubble-strewn way station. As they rushed to finish gathering supplies, the dogged approach of chaos seemed to resonate with the electric hum of the grave responsibility upon them. He understood now. This moment was life or death, not just for himself, but for every living thing on both sides of the gate. The door swung open abruptly, and the shadows of Yukshin began to creep into the light. Together, they faced the horizon, heartbeats synchronizing like the pulse of a resonant ley line, each moment now carefully turning toward survival. Chapter 10. Prototype and Oath. In the dim light of the way station, shadows danced along the walls as Caleb Ward hunched over a makeshift workbench, sweat slicking his brow. The hum of the ley lines pulsed in sync with his heartbeat, a vibrant echo of the urgency spiraling around him. He gripped a handful of copper coils, their surfaces gleaming dully under the flickering overhead lights. Next to him, Lyra Thane held a round resonance coil, decorated with sigils he barely understood, tightly against her chest. "Okay, Caleb," she said, her green eyes gleaming with determination. "This needs to connect like we practiced earlier. If we can stabilize the ward, it might hold long enough to give us time." "Yeah, sure," he replied, his voice edged with uncertainty. He strung the coils alongside the ward's interface, fiddling with the connections. His fingers danced amid the wires, guided by instinct and his past as a mechanic. "But we still need those Earth-grade components to make it right," he added, biting his lip as he glanced toward the entrance, where shadows moved erratically in the gathering gloom. "Agreed, but this is our best shot," Lyra urged, her confidence palpable. "If we can demonstrate that our hybrid approach works, they might trust us enough to let you gather the parts you need." Caleb nodded, his heart racing as he fit the last connection into place. He paused, the memory of the Yukshin growls from outside echoing in his mind. "Right. If we fail this, it's all over. We get pushed out and His throat tightened. He couldn't let that happen. Not after everything they'd faced. They needed him to be the Earth Key. With a deep breath, he flipped on the resonance coil. The air crackled as energy surged through the wires, humming in harmony with the ley line's rhythmic pulse. Blue-white light bloomed in the center, illuminating the ancient runes that carved their way around the ward's edge. It's working! Excitement surged through him, pulling him from doubt to determination. For a moment, he felt a spark of pride swell in his chest. But then, just as quickly, reality crashed over him. "We still need those parts," he muttered, his elation tempered by urgency. "If we can't stabilize it as a permanent fix, what's the point?" Lyra, watching the glowing ward stabilizing before them, let out a long breath. "Right, we'll just have to move fast. I'll cover you while you gather." A loud crash sounded from the doorway, cutting her off. The growls from earlier intensified, punctuated by the snapping of wood and metal. A chill slithered down Caleb's spine. They were closing in fast. "They're here," he hissed, heart racing anew. Caleb shot a glance at Lyra, whose features hardened into a mask of resolve. "We need to finish this and get the components fast before they overrun us." He immediately moved toward the scattered tools strewn about the way station, hoping to spot the essential components between flights of desperation. Each second felt like a lifetime, his focus tunneling. The glow from the resonance coil cast sharp patterns in the air, fighting against the darkness encroaching around them. Lyra nodded, her voice low but urgent. "It's time, Caleb. Prove to them that our method works. Let's make this happen." With a fierce determination, he resolved to stay one step ahead of the overwhelming threat. As they pressed onward, the sound of Ukshan growls unmistakably grew louder, sinking into the pervading tension that gripped the air. No turning back now. Caleb turned back to the coil, aligning his focus. The weight of expectation, both from Lyra and the lives at stake, settled onto his shoulders, solidifying into a burning desire to not just survive, but to lead them from this chaos. "Let's prove we can do this," he said, as sparks of electricity danced across the coil once more, igniting the path forward. Their moment of success twisted into another layer of urgency, and he prepared to act. As the growling voices of the Yukshan intensified, reminding both him and Lyra of the peril just outside, Caleb felt that the true fight was only beginning. They had a prototype, but time had come to secure the crucial supplies before it all came crashing down around them. The stakes were higher than ever, and their chance to salvage this world, and perhaps the next, slipped further away with each heartbeat. Lyra leaned against the rough-hewn wall of the way station, feeling the tremors of the Yukshin crashing outside. The soft glow from the ward flickered, a frantic heartbeat against the approach of danger. Caleb stood across the table, his brow furrowed in concentration, examining the prototype resonance coil they'd just assembled. She could see the gears turning in his mind. Their partnership was shifting from hesitant alliance to something more firm, a connection tempered by shared crisis. "Caleb, we need to stick to the plan," she urged, her voice cutting through the uneasy quiet. "If we don't synchronize our efforts to stabilize the ward, we won't hold back the Yukshin." The sound of their growls grew closer, punctuating her words. "I get it, Lyra." He didn't look up, fingers tracing the coil's metal body. "But I'm not the only one needed here." A pang of uncertainty flickered in her chest. "This plan hinges on us working together. Your mechanical skills make all the difference." She took a step forward, finding his gaze. "My magic is waning. I won't be able to hold this ward forever. Once it falters, we're sitting ducks." Caleb paused, finally lifting his eyes to meet hers, shadows of impending doom hovering behind them. "Then we dive in together, right? I'll back you up. Just tell me what you need." She felt her determination swell at his words. The weight of her failures threatened to drown her, the memory of her mentor's death stinging fresh, but Caleb's presence was like a lifeline. We will stabilize the ward for as long as I can. But if we can't acquire those Earth-grade components soon, everything will collapse. Both worlds will fall. I'll make it work, he said, a fire igniting in his voice. I won't let us fail. Then swear it. Lyra stepped closer, holding the tension between them like a live wire. We finish this, no matter what. You, me, together. I swear? His voice was steady, resolve etched into his features. The sound of a heavy impact echoed through the way station, wood creaking ominously under the pressure. The Yukshin were almost through. Lyra felt the adrenaline race through her veins, urgency clawing at her instincts. Ready? She asked, fighting down her own fear. Always. Caleb nodded, determination solidified in his stance as he gathered tools. Then let's move. As they prepared to act, another crash resonated, sending splinters flying from the doorway. The time was now. Together, they braced for the onslaught that awaited them, their partnership forged in this moment of undeniable urgency. Chapter 11. Back in Rust Creek. Sheriff Marta Lopez stood in the dim light of her office, flipping through reports of strange surges and flickering lights that seemed to plague Rust Creek in recent weeks. The rhythmic hum of unease ticked in her stomach like a metronome, matching the unsettling reports. She glanced up as the door creaked open, revealing Caleb Ward and Lyra Thane, shadows blending into the light from the hallway behind them. "Sheriff," Caleb greeted, his Texan drawl steady, but Marta could see the worry etched on his weathered face. "We need to talk." "About what?" she replied, crossing her arms, her stance firm. The air crackled with unspoken tension. "You've been sneaking around, and my office is getting curious looks from the townsfolk. They want to know what's happening out there." Caleb exchanged glances with Lyra, whose piercing green eyes held a flicker of concern. "The gate, it isn't just a portal. It's drawing in something big, something dangerous." The urgency in his voice sent a shiver through Marta, a sharp reminder of the past when she had ignored warnings. The last thing she wanted was for history to repeat itself. "Drawing in? So you're saying what? That it's a magnet for monsters?" Marta's skepticism rose. The town had enough trouble without running risks based on half-baked theories. Lyra stepped forward, her slender frame seeming to swell with gravity as she spoke. "These anomalies are connected to Malric's Nullstone engine. It's destabilizing the very fabric of both worlds. If we don't act, Rust Creek could face—" She hesitated, a flicker of guilt flashing in her eyes. "Catastrophe." "Marta," Caleb said softly, almost pleading, "we need your help. The creatures are already blending into the shadows. You must secure the town. We can fortify the way station, make it a safe zone." His hands tensed by his sides, grease-stained yet determined, as though they held the weight of multiple worlds. Marta's mind raced. She could see the flicker of doubt in the eyes of the townsfolk as they gathered, weaving tales of what might be brewing beyond the hills. She swallowed hard, piecing together her duty to maintain order and her urge to trust two people who had crossed paths with danger. Could they truly keep the town safe? "Fortify the way station? Are you sure you're ready for that?" she challenged, stepping closer, eyes narrowing. "You're not just talking about some barn repair, you're talking about fighting monsters." "Against what we're up against, it's our only shot," Lyra replied, her voice steady but edged with fear. "You can't manage this alone. The longer you wait, the closer they'll get." Marta could feel the walls closing in, the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. A town divided. A sheriff who could be a hero or a fool. She took a deep breath. Fine. But we need to make this an alliance. I won't have outside influences stirring panic among the people. The urgency from Caleb's and Lyra's resolve seeped into her own veins. If things escalate, we can't have anyone second-guessing. Caleb nodded, relief mingling with the ever-present urgency flickering in his eyes. We work together. You keep the peace, and we'll build defenses. Let's plan then. We'll need resources. Marta's voice, once skeptical, morphed into the familiar tones of a leader rallying her team. As she laid out the framework for their alliance, the weight of impending darkness loomed, but for the first time, she felt a flicker of hope battling against the chaos. Starting with securing the way station, she added, before pausing, but tell me everything you know about what's coming. Caleb and Lyra exchanged a brief but loaded glance. The ghosts of past choices danced like shadows in their eyes. We'll stop it together, Lyra promised, the air thrumming with conviction. Marta nodded, resolve settling like steel in her chest. She turned to lead the way, knowing that if they failed, it would cost more than just their safety. It would be the fault line between two worlds' fate. As they stepped outside, the tension coiled tighter, leaving them with the weight of imminent battle pressing against the horizon. Shadows shifted against the light, whispers of the unknown already clawing at the edges of Rust Creek. Caleb Ward peered through the dusty window of Ward Repair and Metal, his heart pounding like a blacksmith's hammer. The shadows of Rust Creek stretched long under a late afternoon sun, but he couldn't enjoy it. The conversation with Sheriff Marta Lopez lingered like smoke in the air. Her doubts about the strange occurrences, the power surges that had rattled radios and sent townsfolk glancing nervously at one another. He had to act quickly before uncertainty morphed into panic. "Let's move," he urged Lyra, who stood to his side, eyes scanning the yard for signs of attention. "We need to gather everything we can without raising any red flags." Her piercing green gaze met his, and despite their earlier skirmishes with the Yukshin, the creatures spilling into his world from the Iron Gate, there was a tenuous bond forming. They tucked themselves behind a row of weathered crates, and for the first time in days, the rushing anxiety in Caleb shifted toward determination. The stakes couldn't be higher. Failing to gather vital components to stabilize the hybrid protocol meant jeopardizing not just their lives, but the very fabric of both worlds. "First up, we need copper coils," he said, surveying the scattered tools across the yard. "Can't risk unnecessary noise." He reached for a toolbox. Every clang and scrape screamed risk. "Stick close," Lyra whispered, her voice low and urgent. She checked her satchel, checking for sigils and wards that seemed to shimmer with potential. "We need to work methodically. This won't be quick." Caleb nodded, tension tightening in his chest. He unlatched the toolbox and began sifting through the contents with practiced ease. A wrench here, a part there, but his mind drifted to the townsfolk. What would happen if their suspicions about him and Lyra turned into accusations? Could they protect Rust Creek without the support of its residents? The thought wormed its way into his head, a gnawing discomfort. "Caleb!" Lyra's sharp voice broke through. It yanked him back into the moment. "We're moving too slow. They're noticing." He glanced up, and the unease permeating the air was palpable. A cluster of townsfolk had gathered at the corner, their whispers swirling around him like a storm. Some were watching his every move. Howell, the town mechanic, shot him a skeptical look. Caleb knew the townsfolk were uneasy. The recent energy anomalies fed into their suspicion like kindling on a fire. "Let's go back," Lyra urged, her brow furrowing in concern. "If we can't mask our intentions—" "No." The word burst from him, harsher than he intended. "We need more parts. We can't turn back now. If we don't fortify that way station, Malric's forces will wipe out everything here." The urgency in his tone took her by surprise, and even he felt the weight of his own conviction. "You're right," she finally conceded, and he could see the taut strings of anxiety in her. "Just be smart about it." The sound of footsteps on gravel sent a jolt through him. Caleb ducked down low, his heart racing again as he peered around the crates. The sheriff passed by, accompanied by a couple of townsfolk, their eyes heavy with suspicion. They exchanged glances that burned into him. "Keep your head down," he hissed to Lyra as he snatched up a handful of copper coils and shoved them into his toolbox. "We'll find a different way back." They scuttled toward the rear entrance, moving swiftly through the shadows of the shop, but an ugly gnaw of worry churned within him as he pondered their next moves. Would Marta support a harebrained plan to defend the town against otherworldly monsters, or would she assume they were causing the problems? The risk loomed large. They needed to secure the components and maintain order all at once. As they stepped into the relative silence of the workshop, real urgency propelled Caleb. "We'll cover each other," he said, adjusting his toolbox. "Trust me." He felt Lyra's gaze on him, and the weight of shared purpose held them both steady. There was a flicker of hope beneath the tension. If they worked together, perhaps they could outsmart the growing threat. Caleb took a deep breath, steadying his resolve. This wasn't just about gathering parts. This was their chance to forge a defense strong enough to protect Rust Creek. With a determined nod from Lyra, they moved out again, ready to confront suspicion and the lurking danger that awaited them both outside and within the distorted realities threatening their worlds. Chapter 12. Pressure Rises. The sun hung low over Rust Creek, casting long shadows across the dusty streets as Sheriff Marta Lopez walked among the murmuring crowd gathering near Ward Repair and Meadow. The townsfolk's voices buzzed with concern, their faces etched with curiosity and suspicion. Marta caught snippets of conversation, words like unusual, secretive, and intimidating. Each utterance weighed on her like a stone in her gut. Caleb and Lyra were inside the shop, only a few paces away from the scrutiny, working to gather whatever components they could. They hadn't yet noticed the eyes trained upon them, and Marta felt a wave of urgency surge through her. If they were caught in their preparations, it could expose the breach that threatened both worlds, plunging her entire community into chaos. "Caleb, get moving!" she called out, her voice taking on a sharp edge that cut through the murmurs. He glanced up, brow furrowed, and for a moment, the tension in his shoulders eased as he met her gaze. But the worry quickly returned. Even from this distance, she could see it, the way he paused, his hand hovering just above the toolbox. Lyra was there too, searching the yard for more materials, her slender form twisting to peer behind crates and under tools. Marta didn't want to imagine what would happen if they failed. Mustering her authority, she stepped closer, her presence a shield for them against the mounting scrutiny. "Everything all right in there?" she asked, voice steady but urgent as she positioned herself subtly between the gathered townsfolk and the open shop door. "You two are not causing any trouble, are you?" Caleb chuckled in a low voice that didn't quite mask the tension. "Just salvaging some stuff, Sheriff. You know how repairs can be." Repairs. The word lingered in the air like a warning. The townsfolk were desperate for answers, and when the realization tightened in her chest, Marta felt the weight of responsibility inch closer. She couldn't afford to let suspicion boil over into panic. But could she maintain order without tipping them off about the danger? Reading the crowd, Marta witnessed expressions shifting from worry to impatience, eyes darting back to the shop. She could see a decision loomed. If she confronted Caleb and Lyra now, the confrontation could spiral out of control. But letting things continue as they were could mean exposing the truth that needed concealing. "Caleb," she growled softly, ensuring her words reached him without attracting attention, You need to hurry. Townsfolk are starting to piece things together. We don't have the luxury to delay. He looked at her, urgency sparking in his eyes. We're almost done, Marta. Just need a few more copper coils and… Now isn't the time. Just grab what you can while I hold them off. Lyra's head snapped around, her expression a mix of alarm and comprehension as she weighed their diminishing time. The minute hand ticked painfully slow, and Marta could practically feel the townsfolk inching closer, whispering louder, their curiosity brewing into a storm. Got it, Caleb replied sharply, and the way he pivoted toward a stack of tools revealed his resolve. They weren't just gathering scraps anymore, they were racing against an exposure that could unravel everything they were trying to build. As he moved, his hands grabbed copper coils with deft precision, tossing them into the toolbox while glancing sidelong at the swell of townsfolk moving closer to the shop entrance. Lyra followed suit, grabbing anything that looked remotely useful. Stand firm, Marta murmured to herself, forcing her voice to remain calm. The pressure was rising, and soon it might shatter into chaos. The curiosity of the crowd swelled, and down the street, Marta could see Howell approaching, his brows knitted together with skepticism. Taking a deep breath, she stepped further into view, straightening her shoulders. Nothing to see here, she called out, raising her voice enough to draw attention. Just a little routine maintenance. You folks keep your distance. The townsfolk exchanged glances, but some weren't convinced. Howell's voice rang out over the thrumming tension. What kind of maintenance needs that much secrecy, Sheriff? Marta's heart raced. The moment was slipping. The kind that keeps all of us safe, she shot back, her voice steady. Each word was armed with authority, meant to divert their attention, to keep them at bay. Caleb and Lyra worked rapidly, the stakes too high, the risk too palpable. With every movement, Marta became acutely aware of the narrowing window. If they didn't finish soon, she'd have to decide, confront the townsfolk and risk it all, or divert attention and hope for the best. As fear and urgency mixed in her gut, she finally knew, in this moment, the safety of Rust Creek hinged on keeping secrets just a little longer. The palpable tension pressed in, and with it, the knowledge that their fates were now irrevocably entwined. Leave them be, Marta ordered, her voice pouring steel into her uncertainty as she steeled herself against the crowd. As their pressure mounted, the stakes of her next move became clearer than ever. The question loomed, would it be enough to hold the line, or would she have to fight to protect what they were building? Caleb pushed through the yard, the sun behind him casting long shadows as he reached for a handful of copper coils. The late afternoon heat buzzed in his ears, but it wasn't the warmth that had him sweating, it was the unease crowding around him. The townsfolk had formed a tight half-circle outside the shop, glancing from Marta to him, their eyes sharper than knives. "Damn it, Marta," he muttered under his breath, eyes flicking to Howell, who stood with arms crossed at the front of the crowd, a frown carved deep into his brow. The sheriff was still positioning herself between them and the growing number of onlookers, her voice steady but strained. Just keep them back a little longer. Caleb needed these coils. He could feel the weight of responsibility gnawing at him. Failure to secure them would expose all their preparations, jeopardizing everything he was trying to protect, including Rust Creek itself. His fingers trembled slightly as he organized the tools in front of him, forcing himself to focus. "Think fast. Don't get rattled," he whispered. "Why's the shop so quiet? What's really going on in there?" Howell's voice rang out, slicing through the tension. Caleb turned sharply, irritation rising. "What's it to you, Howell? We're just fixing some things up. How long you gonna keep hiding secrets from the town?" Howell pushed, edging the crowd closer, eyes narrowing as they flicked back to Marta for reassurance. Caleb's heart raced, but he couldn't let the pressure suffocate him. He started gathering the coils, each piece a lifeline they desperately needed to activate the hybrid solutions that would help hold off Malric's scouts. One more set, he thought, and I'm out of here. He leaned over, shoving coils into the toolbox with a sense of urgency, every clink echoing in the charred silence. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Marta step up, her jaw set tight, cutting into Howell's rising challenge. "You'll get your answers," she said firmly, but Caleb could see beads of sweat forming on her temples. Caleb took a deep breath, forcing his mind back to the task. He estimated what they needed, at least 3 more coils, maybe some connectors, anything to complete their makeshift devices. He turned to snatch up a fresh supply from the shelf. The townsfolk's murmurs grew louder, an undercurrent of suspicion that pricked at him like thorns. "Hey, Caleb, you good?" Lyra interrupted, her voice low but urgent. She stood just inside the shop, rifling through a satchel of supplies. "We should move fast. They're starting to question Marta more openly." "Yeah, I know," he replied quickly, not looking up. "Just grabbing the coils. I'll be right out." "Right out," he repeated, grounded on the edge of almost panic. If he didn't move faster, that promise might fall through. Just as a coil slipped from his fingers, Caleb caught a glimpse of Howell's advancing figure, muscles tense beneath his plaid shirt, intent on grilling Marta until she cracked. The last thing Caleb needed right now was for the situation to blow up, for the attention to shift entirely toward him and Lyra and the mysteries lurking in the shop. Scooping the copper coils into the toolbox, he shut the lid with a firm snap, the resonating bang echoing his resolve. Come on," he chanted quietly as he stepped toward the exit. "Caleb!" Marta's voice cut through the air. "We need to talk." He stepped outside, chest tight. "I've got what we need, but what if Howell keeps pressing?" Marta took a breath, glancing at the crowd. "I'll handle Howell. Just be ready to act." A shadow passed over Caleb as he straightened, and his heart thudded painfully as he locked eyes with Howell, who was now standing just a few feet away, arms crossed defiantly. The crowd leaned in, anticipation crackling the air like an impending storm. "Right," Caleb affirmed, shifting into focused determination. Keeping eye contact with Howell, he gripped the toolbox tight, ready to pivot the moment things escalated. His pulse quickened, the stakes clear. One wrong move could mean losing everything he was fighting for. And yet, in that split second of tension, he felt the heat of urgency turn to a sharp, clear sense of purpose. They couldn't afford to falter, not now. He took a step forward, letting instinct guide him. With everything on the line, he was ready to outsmart them all. But just as he finished the thought, Howell's voice boomed again. "Marta! What's the town hiding? We deserve to know the real story." Caleb's stomach dropped. He shot Marta a silent plead for action, knowing the moment was teetering. He couldn't let it break. It was time to execute the plan, but their success hinged on both secrecy and resolve. "Gather what you can," he whispered to Lyra, urgency clear in his voice. "We're on borrowed time." Just as Marta braced to confront the crowd, Caleb felt the weight of the coils in his hands, the metallic promise of power. With a focused stride, he pushed toward the front, prepared to secure Rust Creek's defenses one way or another. Howell's lingering gaze didn't faze him anymore. He had what he needed. Now, all he had to do was hold off the crowd a little longer, and everything could still work out. As he stepped toward the crowd, hope mingled with anxiety, and the uncertain silence turned electric. Chapter 13. Lines in the Sand. Lyra stood on the crumbling stone steps of the way station, her heart pounding as the dusk light dimmed around her. Shadows of the ancient ruins seemed to stretch toward her, echoing the weight of apprehension that hung in the air. Caleb was nearby, fiddling with tools, disassembled generators and copper coils scattered like shrapnel around them. But her mind whirled with a storm of doubts far heavier than anything mechanical. "How long do you think we can hold it together?" she asked, her voice almost lost in the soft rustle of the wind through the gnarled branches. The question lingered, trembling in the charged atmosphere. Caleb glanced up, concern flickering across his features. "We've proved our methods work, Lyra. The ward's activated, but we need more time." A pained expression crossed her face. "Time isn't the problem. We don't know what happens if we seal this gate. What if it traps us? Or worse, what if it breaks everyone on this side?" She took a shaky breath, pressing her palms against her thighs as if physically grounding herself. "If I can't manage my magic properly, I could compromise everything." He approached, kneeling beside her. "You've been battling this for too long. We're in this together. You said you can guide us through the nullstone interference. That's not a small thing. But what if my power fades altogether?" She clasped her hands tighter, feeling the weight of her fears spill over. "What if I can't protect you, or the others? Caleb's steady gaze pierced her swirling uncertainty. "The point isn't just about one of us. It's about what happens if we don't even try. You've stood against Malric's forces and survived. We've got a shot at fixing this, together." His words struck her like a lancing sun through the clouds. Here they were, on the precipice of an impossible task, grappling with the specter of failure. For a moment, tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them back, fortifying her resolve. Sharing these fears didn't weaken her. It formed a bond, one she never expected to need, but now clung to desperately. "You're right," she finally admitted, her voice steadier. "I can't allow myself to doubt now. If sealing the gate means we lose everything, I have to trust in both of us. But it's complicated." Caleb nodded, understanding unspoken. "Complicated is what makes us strong. We face this uncertainty together, partner." The shift in her chest was palpable, a lightening of burden as they prepared for whatever madness lay ahead. Vulnerabilities shared, they stood as one against the complexities of their journey. Before she could say more, footsteps echoed behind them. They turned to find Marta approaching, her expression grim yet resolute, an anchor amidst the chaos encroaching from both worlds. "No time to lose. Whatever's coming, we need to be ready," the sheriff said, her sharp eyes scanning the surroundings. "The crowd isn't letting up. Now's the time to make our move." Lyra glanced at Caleb, whose determined expression mirrored her own newfound clarity. "We'll fix this," she whispered. "Together." As they nodded in silent agreement, the urgency enveloped them. But now it felt different, charged with purpose, intertwined in an unbreakable bond. They stepped forward, ready to face the looming darkness hand in hand, the path ahead fraught with danger but illuminated by their shared commitment. Caleb leaned against the rough wooden post of the way station's porch, his gaze flickering between Sheriff Marta and the town's escalating crowd. The murmur of increasing suspicion ebbed and flowed around them, as relentless as the nagging hum deep within his ranch. "Marta, we have to move fast," he urged, wiping his grease-stained hands on his jeans. "The longer we wait, the closer those Yukshin get, and the tighter the crowd's gonna squeeze." Marta, sturdy and determined, crossed her arms, her sharp eyes glinting under the waning light. "You still haven't given me a solid reason for all this secrecy, Caleb. What exactly are we dealing with?" His heart raced as he tempered his impatience. "I can't explain everything now. Believe me, it's complicated, but that gate—" He hesitated, feeling the weight of the words hanging in the air. "It's not just a portal, it's an open invitation for chaos. If Malric's creatures breach here, it won't just disrupt the town, it could endanger both worlds." Caleb watched as doubt flickered in Marta's expression, the lines of worry etched deeper into her weathered face. In that moment, He shifted his focus from the tactical need to a deeper trust, an emotional bond that strengthened under fire. Look, Marta, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't urgent. We need traps set up at the perimeter, diversions to channel any Yukshin that try to cross. I've been working on generator traps to hold back the tide. The sheriff nodded slowly, her expression shifting from skepticism to something more resembling resolve. I trust your instincts, Caleb, but I can't promise to keep the townsfolk calm forever. She gestured towards the scattered residents, some casting curious glances, others murmuring like a gathering storm. They're starting to question why their sheriff's hiding things. We'll have to manage their suspicions. If we disclose even part of what's happening, panic will break out, and you know how quick that can spread, he said, urgency tinting his Texan drawl. Just keep them busy while we gear up. Marta took a deep breath, clearly wrestling with her own fears. And what's the end game here? You think you can just seal this gate and everything will go back to normal? No, Caleb admitted, feeling the heaviness of truth in his chest. But if we can set the traps and buy time, we might just figure out how to stabilize the protocol. It'll take teamwork. Teamwork, she echoed, looking him in the eye, her sharp gaze softening. I'll hide whatever I have to, but we need to act. The people deserve to know something. Tell them we're working on it, Caleb suggested, that we're preparing defenses in case things go sideways. You know how I can work with this tech? It's gonna hold. With a firm nod, Marta stood taller. All right, I'll do my best to keep them occupied, but you need to get ready. It's time we give them something to believe in. Caleb felt a surge of gratitude wash over him. It wasn't just about the plan anymore. It was about their alliance, their bond forged in the hottest of fires. As Marta turned to head back toward the throng, he grabbed her arm, holding her back for a moment. You don't know how much this means to me, Marta. We'll get through this. Together. Just don't let me down, Caleb, she replied, then stepped into the rising tide of the crowd. He turned his gaze toward the shadows stretching from the way station, his heart pounding with the weight of the impending confrontation. They had no time left. The clock was ticking. With each breath, he steeled himself for the challenges ahead, knowing that now, more than ever, his ingenuity would be the linchpin in saving both worlds. As he prepared to regroup with Marta, he glanced toward the horizon, the unease of the hum still echoing through the fabric of reality. The storm was brewing, and they had to be ready. Chapter 14. Iron Spire Entry. The shadows lengthened in the Iron Spire's meandering corridors as Lyra Thane adjusted her satchel, tightening its grip against her hip. Her heart thundered in her chest, and with each step, anticipation tinged with anxiety wrapped around her like a cloak. Stay low and keep close, she whispered to Caleb, the resonant coil tucked securely in his hand, a lifeline to their plan. Together, they moved as one, weaving through the dimly lit archways, a patchwork of flickering magic that barely illuminated the path before them. The air thrummed with the oppressive weight of Malric's defenses, a tangible reminder that discovery would lead to failure, not just for them, but for the future of both worlds. Caleb's weathered face was tight with concentration, scanning every corner and crevice, every muted flicker of light that hinted at guards. She could see it in his eyes, the same urgency that mirrored her own. If we're caught, he began, but she hushed him with a stern look. Focus on the goal, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. They had committed to this infiltration, disguises pulled tight against the unease of their mission. Any slip could have catastrophic consequences. They both knew that Malric's minions were everywhere, embedded within the very walls of this fortress, and the magnetic wards humming around them whispered of danger. Ahead, 2 guards stood post, their expressions hard and vigilant. Lyra's pulse quickened. We'll need to time it perfectly, she said, gesturing toward a narrow beam running overhead. A flick of her wrist activated the charm around her neck, its faint glow reflecting her silver-barked sigils. Might be enough for a moment, a distraction to keep them from sensing the change in energy. "On 3, she murmured, counting down with her fingers. Caleb nodded, his gaze focused and determined. 1, 2, now! She sprang upwards, the charm flickering to life as she propelled herself toward the overhead beam. Caleb followed, his stocky build surprisingly agile as he leaped after her. They landed silently just out of sight of the guards. The moment hung thick around them, time suffocating under the pressure of their stealth. Lyra drew a breath, feeling her magic ebb and flow, each pulse stifled and unmistakably weaker in the presence of Nullstone. It sent a shiver of concern through her, the secret of her waning power. If her magic faltered at the wrong moment... With one swift motion, she dipped low, moving past the guards with an urgency that showed on Caleb's face in the faint light of the wards. They slipped around the corner, hearts racing. "Have to find the core systems," she urged, compressing her worries deep inside. As they neared a junction, Lyra felt a flicker in the charm. Something shifted in the flow of magic. A chill danced down her spine. "It's the wards," she whispered, urgency bleeding into fear. "They're more elaborate than I expected, or he anticipated an incursion." Caleb's eyes widened, determination hardening his features. "We still need access. Guides, your maps, show anything nearby?" Lyra's mind raced to process their options, but as they crept deeper, the branches of Malric's defenses loomed larger. "Yes, but..." The charm sputtered, its light flickering dangerously. Panic clawed at her throat. "We can't let them discover us." Her fingers trembled, rallying her focus. Malric's guards could tear them apart, their budding alliance, their very lives depended on silence. Caleb stepped closer, mirroring her urgency as they advanced. "I'll handle any immediate threats. Just guide me to that control panel." He was unwavering, resolving to see this through. Lyra's heart swelled with gratitude, but mingled with apprehension. She was resolute now. They had to complete this infiltration. Failure could end everything. As they reached an intersection marked by low-hanging sigils, a flicker of recognition brought urgency surging through her. "The panel," she breathed, pointing to a faded sign she recognized from her maps. "Yes, that's it." Caleb moved toward it, hand steadying. Just as she began to whisper her next command, a thunderous crash echoed from behind. A guard had spotted their disguise. Instinct kicked in. "Run!" she shouted. They darted toward the control panel, shoving against the magic-coated door just as the guard's footsteps thundered behind them. Forged spells tightened around them, magic binding as they desperately worked against the clock. The weight of the iron spire bore down, but at that moment it was not the threat of capture that loomed largest. It was the possibility of salvation standing behind the door, the potential to connect two worlds and save both, but only if they navigated this perilous game successfully. With urgency sharpening her focus, she ripped away the sigil surface, the translation glyphs flaring as misconceptions twisted into reality. "Caleb, can you see the controls?" she called, breathless and alert. But as she tore away the last remnants of magical interference, the translation charm sputtered, its glow dimming under the pressure. "Lyra!" he shouted, panic flashing across his face. As Caleb dug into the panel's mechanisms, frustration ignited within her. She had to concentrate, rein in her thoughts, but the interference only grew stronger. "Focus!" she yelled, forcing down the rising tide of panic. "We don't have time to falter." Suddenly, Malric's face materialized in her thoughts. The enemy who thrived on domination, shadows of death trailing behind his every word. She channeled it, the fear, the urgency, and turned it into determination. The stakes were too high to waver. With the latch finally released, they pushed through, adrenaline propelling her forward. They entered a labyrinth of swirling energy, each pulse of the system resonating with the rhythm of her heart. "There's no turning back now," she said, breathless. The exit hook of their plan loomed ahead, a control panel glowing in front of them, a promise of connection. But with it also came the risk of Malric's reach, unpredictable defenses and guards still waiting in the wings. The stakes had just gotten higher, and the fight for both worlds was only beginning. Caleb's heart raced, the metallic tang of sweat mixing with the damp air of the spire's inner corridors. He could hear footsteps pounding behind them, the urgency of retreat heightened by the growls of Malric's guards. The panel's control interface loomed ahead, a jumble of unfamiliar sigils and blinking lights. With every second that ticked by, he felt the pressure building in his chest, fear mingling with determination. "What's the access code?" Lyra asked, her voice strained yet steady. The spark of her confidence grounded him, pushing away the encroaching panic. "Just need to find a way in," Caleb replied, squinting at the panel. The buzzing from nearby nullstone tech overwhelmed his senses, distorting both color and sound, making it hard to concentrate. The translation charm that had guided them through the initial defenses sputtered ominously, words tangling into incomprehensible knots. Damn it! He shoved the thought aside, grasping for the mechanical knowledge he'd honed back in Rust Creek. Familiarity flickered to life in his mind. "It's like a circuit board," he muttered, already identifying the parallels to his world. He leaned closer, focusing past the chaotic lights. His hands worked instinctively, tracing the sigils etched into the panel. He pressed one, bracing for a response. The lights flickered, then dimmed, a response tinged with reluctance, as if the ancient magic resisted his touch. "Come on," he urged under his breath, cursing the nullstone's interference. With a determined shove, he pushed harder against the sigils. A dull thrum pulsed beneath his fingers, syncing with the rhythmic hum he'd heard back home. The same pulse he'd learned to tune electrical devices with. He concentrated on that beat, and the panel's interface rippled, releasing a flicker of light. Pure focus swelled within him, washing away the fear of getting caught. His hands flew over the controls, aligning his mechanical knowledge with an instinctual understanding of the magic. A bridge formed between worlds, binding them. "Caleb!" Lyra's voice was a dagger of urgency, spurring him on. The pounding footsteps grew louder, rattling through the stonework. He glanced back as guards rounded the corner, dread slithering down his spine. He pressed on a final sigil. The panel blared in protest, and then, success! The door slid open with a hissing sigh, revealing deeper, more complex corridors full of gleaming, arcane devices impatiently waiting for activation. "Go!" he shouted, motioning for Lyra to follow. But they weren't out of trouble yet. With her heels clicking urgently against the stone, Lyra moved ahead, her green eyes wide, shards of uncertainty underneath bravado. "Can you make this work?" "I can try." A crash echoed from the path they'd just exited, rattling the structure as the guards barreled into view, weapons drawn. Time stretched thin. The stakes spiraled into crystal clarity. If he didn't act now, they would be caught. Or worse. Caleb channeled every ounce of ingenuity he had, muscles coiling tense as he prepared to dive further into the spire's inner workings. "Let's get to the core systems," he breathed, stepping into the unknown, his confidence blooming amid the chaos. He only hoped it would be enough. The silence that followed the crash was deafening, underscoring the fear pounding in his chest as the echoes of pursuit closed in tighter. Chapter 15. The core. Caleb's hands trembled as he crouched before the Nullstone engine, the pulsating hum from his ranch reverberating in the air like a distant heartbeat. The dark metallic structure loomed over him, exuding an oppressive energy that stifled his senses. Sweat beaded on his brow, every minute detail sharpened by the pressure of impending disaster. He had to act fast. "Caleb!" Lyra's voice cut through the tension behind him, filled with urgency. "We don't have much time before—" "I know," he snapped, heart pounding. Panic crept in as he glanced at the door frame where Malric's guards would soon burst through, but he forced his focus back to the wiring spread before him. He'd opened the access panel, but that was only the beginning. The task ahead felt monumental. Rewire the engine using nothing but his instincts and the hum rhythm that had haunted him for weeks. Malric's ominous figure filled the entrance then, tall and cloaked in shadows. "You think you can rewire the engine?" His voice dripped with disdain, ice-cold malice creeping beneath it. "You'll only usher in your own doom." Caleb's pulse quickened as dread coiled in his stomach, but he refused to back down. "Not if I can help it." He shifted gears, mentally calculating the connections. Each wire, each component, needed to align perfectly, and time was against him. The hum grew louder, an echo of hope urging him forward. "Your stubbornness blinds you," Malric continued, stepping closer. The faint glow from the engine illuminated the warden's gaunt face, revealing the madness that lurked behind his calm facade. "You'll become part of my Nullstone tradition, not a savior." The threat hung heavy, mixing with the static pressure radiating from the engine. Caleb felt the room tremble, the power fluctuating dangerously. He gritted his teeth, fighting off the shadows of doubt. The stakes had never been clearer. If he failed, both worlds would collapse, and Malric would tighten his grip over Elinder. Each frayed connection he examined sent tremors of urgency through him. "I'll make this work," he muttered to himself, sucking in a steadying breath. The ranch's hum, the rhythm that had once haunted him, became a lifeline, pulsing through his veins like a mantra. He could sync the wiring to that familiar cadence. "Don't waste your time," Malric taunted, taking another step forward. "You will die for your effort." Caleb looked up, caught between the fury igniting within him and the sheer desperation of the moment. He had no backup, no escape route. Only determination, thriving on the thin line between fear and resolve. "Then I'll die trying," he said, his voice firm. He then dived back into the work, hands deftly picking apart tangled wires, threading them into place where they belonged. The hum swirled around him, louder as he assembled the connections, each twist of the tools echoing against the wall of Malric's malignant confidence. Suddenly, a bolt of energy shot through the wiring, crackling in protest. Caleb jolted back but grounded himself, focusing on the rhythmic pulse emanating from his hands. "No, no!" He fought against the surge, willing the power to stabilize as another round of tremors echoed through the chamber. The Nullstone engine convulsed like a beast roused from sleep, gears whirring ominously in response. The door behind Malric crumbled under the weight of the guard's assault, but he remained unfazed. "You think this will change the fate of your world?" His laughter pierced the chaos. "You are nothing but a man. No magic, no power." Caleb's heart raced as he made a critical decision. He had to trust the hum, to believe it would lead him through. With renewed conviction, he dove deeper into the complex wiring, aligning the last connections to harmonize with the hum's pulse. The engine rumbled violently, flickering on the verge of collapse. "Focus!" Lyra shouted, darting a glance between Caleb and Malric. "We need to act now. He'll—" "Almost there," Caleb shouted back, determination making his voice rise above the chaos. Each second felt like an hour as the room swirled with fear and power. But in that uncertainty, a flicker of hope sparked. He was closer now than he'd ever been. Malric lunged forward, intent on seizing Caleb as the collapse began to close in. The pressure reached a fever pitch as Caleb fought against not only the machinery but also the instinctual urge to flee. He pressed against the chaos, his hands steady, sweat cascading down his brow. Then, it happened. The connections clicked into place, resonating with the hum at last. Light erupted from the engine, bathing Caleb in its brilliance. The joy surged through him, flickering in the hollow of desperation. But that joy held a cost. The engine's energy waned, sending a wave of heat through the chamber. Malric's shadow loomed closer, his eyes wide with rage and fear. It was now or never. The core began to destabilize. The power thrumming beneath Caleb's fingers indicated both success and the inevitability of failure. He was teetering on the brink of a decision that could change everything. The prospect of sacrifice loomed large as he heard Malric sneer behind him. Caleb's breath hitched as the confrontation redefined itself in the stark reality of choice. Sacrificing himself to complete the reset would tether him to Elinder, but save both worlds from impending chaos. The core trembled, energy crackling ominously. Malric faltered, his confidence ebbing in the face of the rising storm. Caleb took a deep breath, grounding himself in purpose, ready to decide between escaping or achieving something greater than himself. Malric's gaunt figure emerged from the shadows of the core chamber, his presence a chill overture to the heated chaos swirling around them. The resonating pulse of the Nullstone engine, now ignited by Caleb's rewiring, crackled with energy, casting a strange light across the stone walls. Malric's grayish skin gleamed under the unstable glow, his embroidered cloak whispering malevolence. "Foolish boy," Malric spat, his voice a cold blade that sliced through the air. "You think you can undo what has been solidified? This engine is beyond you. Your efforts will only mark your downfall." Caleb, hands trembling from exhaustion and coursing adrenaline, kept his focus on the panel before him, knuckles white as he gripped the resonance coil. He could feel the engine's rhythm. He'd synced it with the hum from his ranch, a sound now vital to both worlds. The threat looming behind him, however, grew more tangible with each thudding second. "I'm not backing down," he shot back, squaring his shoulders. Malric stepped closer, a predator closing in on its prey. "You have no idea what you're inviting. Both worlds will pay dearly for your stubbornness. You will become a part of my Nullstone order, and every spark of your connection to reality will be snuffed out." The flickering energy surged, volatile and disobedient, the core pulsating as if it sensed the confrontation's gravity. Caleb's resolve hardened. This wasn't just about him anymore. If he hesitated, if he failed, both Earth and Elendor would fall into ruin. He forced himself to breathe, to steady his hands for the task at hand. "I won't let you control this," he said, his voice low but steady. "Not now, not ever." Malric's contempt twisted into alarm. "No, you cannot," he began, but Caleb cut him off, activating the rewire switch with a decisive flick. Sparks flew, energy crackling between them, and the engine roared to life in a brilliant display. But the success was tainted by peril. The core's stabilizing mechanisms buckled, discharging a harrowing tremor that jarred the walls. Caleb's heart raced, adrenaline pounding in his ears. Malric reeled back, seeking to regain his composure, but Caleb was ready. He could feel the pulse of the rewire aligning with the chaotic energy, but it came with a price. He realized, with sudden clarity, that completing this reset might tether him permanently to Elendor. "Stop!" Malric's shrill command echoed through the chamber, desperation lacing his words. Caleb's fingers danced over the controls, but in that moment, he understood the full scope of what lay before him. The stakes crystallized like glass splintering into a million shards. "Then I make my choice," he murmured under his breath. Caleb's mind raced through possibilities, urgency pushing him to a decision. Was sacrificing his return truly the only path to save both worlds? The impending collapse clawed at him, igniting a fire in his chest that rivaled the energy building in the core. With resolve igniting his veins, Caleb lunged forward, pushing deeper into the intricacies of the engine and into the unknown of sacrifice. Malric's threats fell away, as the dangerous choice loomed larger than any fear, urging him onward. The clock was ticking. If he failed now, they would all be lost. The moment of truth drew near. Caleb gripped the controls tighter, bracing himself for the storm to come. The question was not just how, but whether he could act swiftly enough to save everything he held dear. Chapter 16. Cascade. The Nullstone engine roared like an angry beast, its vibration thrumming through Caleb's bones. With each pulse, the room felt narrower, the air shimmered, and reality itself quaked under the weight of Malric's sinister essence, now bare and leering before him. Caleb's heart raced, thundering in sync with the chaos coiling around them, limbs taut with dread and determination. Caleb gritted his teeth, fingers cold around the resonance coil he had just installed. "You won't stop this, Malric," he spat, wiping the remnants of sweat from his brow with a grease-stained sleeve. The rewire switch, now firmly activated, lit the chamber with a harsh, flickering glow, but all around him crackled instability. He could almost sense the ley lines, frantic, tugging at the threads of both worlds. Malric's gaunt figure rose, cloaked in shadows and fury. "You think this pathetic act of desperation will hold back an empire?" His voice dripped with contempt, but Caleb saw the flicker of fear in his narrowed eyes. "Your interference will be your end." The engine responded, tremors intensifying as if in agreement with Malric's threat. Energy danced dangerously along the walls, twisting the sigils etched in iron. A chaotic symphony of power longing for control. Caleb swallowed hard. He could almost hear the engine screaming, pleading for stability. He was caught in an escalating cascade, one that could turn catastrophic in an instant. "Then let it be my end," Caleb yelled back, adrenaline fueling a defiance that, for a moment, drowned out the doubt creeping into his mind. He could not think of failure, not now. Lives depended on this. The reset process teetered on a knife's edge, and he felt the responsibility weigh down on him like an anchor. Caleb's jaw clenched. "This is about more than you or I," he said, almost pleading, not just for Malric's understanding, but for his own clarity. "If we don't stabilize this engine, both our worlds will fall. You may suppress magic, but you cannot control destiny." Malric's demeanor cracked. In that fleeting moment of transparency, Caleb glimpsed the vulnerability beneath the tyrant's exterior. "You know nothing of destiny. You are a mere mechanic." The warden's tone turned dark and threatened. "You'll lose everything, Caleb. You will be trapped here, just like those you claim to save." The cascade of energy surged, the hum of the engine crescendoing into a tormenting howl. Caleb staggered but gripped the controls tighter, feeling the sensation of rupture threatening to envelop him. The core crackled, reactive threads of energy warming his skin. Just beyond Malric, the shimmering portal loomed, a gaping maw threatening to expel chaos if he made the wrong move. "I won't allow you to use me," Caleb shouted, the resolve puncturing his earlier hesitations. The fear, the isolation, everything shaped his journey, forging a fire in his heart. This mission had become something greater than a mechanic's duty. It was an act of rebellion against tyranny. He took a deep breath, centering himself. The ranch hum echoed in his mind, a metaphorical pulse he had learned to tune into. It resonated beneath the chaos, and suddenly it was as though he could mesh the heart of both worlds into one solitary point of focus. "This might sting," he muttered, determination washing over his nerves. With a swift flick of his wrist, Caleb refocused the adjustments, manipulating the core's resonance to sync with the frequency he had discovered, the ranch's hum given life with a purpose. The engine stabilized momentarily, the tumult around him twisting into something solid yet precarious. Malric's furious gaze locked onto him, the shift in power almost visible, as if the energies of both worlds were adjusting to this very moment. "You think you can—" Caleb cut him off, his voice booming. "I can, and I will." The urgency, the necessity infused his raw power with desperate hope. He realized then that the stakes had never been clearer. The line between sacrifice and failure had blurred to nothing. Before him lay a pivotal choice, one that could tether him to Elindor forever or save both worlds. The core trembled, demanding resolve. The cascade of instability had become a crescendo, urging him, guiding him towards a decision that bore the weight of creation and destruction alike. Time pressed in. The moment had arrived. As adrenaline coursed through his veins, Caleb dug deep, heart pounding, acknowledging the potential cost to save both worlds. He refused to yield to Malric's intimidation, and with that, his choice was made. "Let's find out what happens," he murmured, determination fueling his next move, releasing the full potential of the newfound power resonating through him. A brilliant light engulfed the chamber, pulling him into the wake of fate as he braced for the repercussions of his choice. The stability of the core hung in the balance. It was the moment to act, and it was barely enough for what came next. The air inside the core chamber crackled with raw energy, the bright pulse of the nullstone engine casting eerie shadows across the stone walls. Lyra stood beside Caleb, heart racing as the engine throbbed ominously, a rhythm that spoke of impending chaos. Malric's cold laughter reverberated through the space, his gaunt figure an unsettling silhouette against the blinding light. "You think you can manipulate it, mechanic?" Malric taunted, his voice a velvet hiss. "You're only sealing your fate, and hers." He gestured toward Lyra, a smirk playing on his lips. "It's charming, really, watching you throw yourself into the fire to save a world that's already doomed." Caleb's jaw tightened, determination mixing with dread. He kept his eyes on the oscillating lights of the core, memory of the ranch hum igniting an idea. If he could sync the core to that frequency. "Caleb," Lyra urged, urgency lacing her tone. She placed a steadying hand on his arm, grounding him amidst the crackling energy. "You have to act before it's too late. This unstable state," she motioned toward the engine's increasing fury, "it's your moment. We can't lose hope now." Malric interrupted, stepping closer, his presence a heavy weight. "Hope, this is folly. You will doom yourself and her if you continue." He stepped into the glow of the core, shadows deepening under his dark cloak. "I offer you an out, a chance to abandon this absurdity. Think of your home." "Home?" Caleb echoed, the word tasting bitter on his tongue. He felt a swell of rebellion rise within him, memories of Rust Creek and the ranch flashing through his mind. The weight of his past, the loneliness, the inherited land, the isolation, combined with the glimmer of a new purpose. He would not let this man decide his fate. He couldn't turn back now, not with lives hanging in the balance. "Caleb!" Lyra's voice broke through his thoughts like a lifeline. "You can't lose sight of the stakes. If you choose to let fear bind you, both our worlds will collapse under Malric's reign. Her expression, fierce and yet trembling, pierced through the fog of doubt. In that moment, he recognized the choice laid before him, not just a calculation about the core, but a decision about who he wanted to be. The path of safety or the risk of potential loss. A sacrifice. Stepping toward the core, Caleb gripped the resonance coil, every instinct screaming at him to retreat, yet determination lit a fire in his chest. With steady breaths, he called on the hum, the pulse of life coursing through him, feeling it resonate with the core. The lights flickered in response, a fleeting, delicate synchronization swelling, and at once, the chaos settled. But he needed to push further. The brief stabilization would not hold. A decisive action was required. "I accept it," he said, his voice threading through the chaos. "I'll do it. I'll stabilize it." Malric's expression darkened, fury rippling across his features. "You think you can take control? You are nothing but a pawn." Caleb straightened, grounding himself against the throbbing pulse, acknowledging the risk but welcoming the thrill of agency. A pawn willing to sacrifice everything to save more than just myself. In that moment, resolve crystallized. The world around him faded. The chaos, the looming threat of Malric, even the risk of being lost forever in this realm, every fear shrank against the weight of purpose. With a steady hand, he reached toward the core, intent on severing his earth tether to complete the reset. "Caleb!" Lyra shouted, her eyes wide with panic. "You don't have to." "I do," he called back, certainty fueling his resolve as he made the fateful decision, fingers brushing the control mechanism in preparation. "For both our worlds, Lyra, I won't let them collapse." As he executed the command, a cascade of light encircled him, the core responding to his impulse with a violent surge. In that moment, he felt the ocean of energy crash against him, darkly beautiful and terrifying. The air thickened with tension, but he knew he had acted for a cause greater than himself. With a final breath that tasted of salt and iron, Caleb severed the tether. The world spun around him, and a brilliant light swallowed the chamber. As the glow intensified, he felt a strange mix of loss and liberation in his choice. He was no longer just a mechanic from Rust Creek. He was a bridge between worlds. And as the light engulfed him, he wondered if he would ever return home. Chapter 17. The Protocol. Caleb's heart raced as he stood at the core of the iron spire, the eerie glow of the nullstone engine pulsing around him like a heartbeat. The chamber trembled as electrical discharges sparked in the air, crackling with raw, dangerous energy. He could taste the tension hanging thick in his throat, an oppressive weight that mirrored the chaos swirling in the chamber. Lyra crouched beside him, her green eyes wide with determination and panic, the fading light of her magic flickering dangerously. "Caleb, we need to synchronize our actions," she urged, her voice a steadying anchor amid the chaos. The words struck him like a thunderclap, igniting his resolve. He had to stabilize the core, but Malric's presence loomed larger now, each taunt from the shadowy figure at the chamber's threshold sinking into his mind like nails. "You can't save them," Malric hissed, his gaunt face twisted in contempt. "You'll be nothing but a prisoner, just like your Earth, trapped within this dying realm." Caleb's pulse quickened. He felt the weight of his fears pressing against him, the fear of failing his family, his community, the fear of embracing a fate with no return. Yet beneath it all flickered an ember of determination. "We're not backing down," he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. This was his moment. He gripped the resonance coil tightly, recalling the rhythm he had felt beneath his feet at the ranch, the humming heart of the earth itself. Each pulse resonated in his mind, guiding him towards a painfully necessary truth. He could use this frequency to channel stability into the core. The thought solidified his focus. Lyra glanced at him, her expression raw with urgency. "I need you to channel it now, Caleb. We don't have time." Gritting his teeth, he met her gaze. "I won't let you or Elendor down." Caleb took a deep breath and pressed the coil against the controls. The rhythm of the ranch echoed in his mind, drawing forth a strange sense of peace amid the chaos. He felt the core pulse beneath his hands, flaring up with newfound energy. "Now!" he shouted, echoing Lyra's calls. As they synchronized, a surge of harmonized energy threw light across the chamber, illuminating Malric's widening eyes in shock. But that moment was fleeting. The fluctuation in the core wavered violently, and Caleb could feel the trembling of the walls around them. The instability heightened. "Caleb!" Lyra urged desperately, her hands gripping the console as she fought against the turmoil. "We're losing control." Panic threatened to claw its way into his gut, but he steeled himself. With a clear resolve, he knew what had to happen next. "I have to sever my earth tether," he said, the realization settling heavily within him. It was more than just a command. It was a choice, a sacrifice he would have to make to protect those he cared for. "No," Lyra's voice broke, panic flickering at the edges of her resolve. "Caleb, don't! We can find another way." "There is no other way," he shouted, feeling the gravitational pull of his decisions resolutely toward the future. He gazed into the chaos, the uncertainty, and the promise of a better outcome. He could save everyone, but it would cost him everything. "I'll do it." With one last glance at Lyra, determination solidified in his heart. He activated the switch, severing the ancient ties to his home as the brightness surged, enveloping the chamber in a blinding light. The energy erupted like a consuming wave, twisting reality around them. Caleb felt the tether snap, a sharp and nauseous feeling radiating through him. In that instant, he knew he had crossed the point of no return. He was now bound to Elendor, linked to the fabric of its survival or destruction. As the energy from the core pulsed relentlessly, the last thing he heard was Lyra's voice, steady and grounding, urging him to hold on. But the world spun into chaos, their fates entwined in the blinding eruption, one that now left the very lives of both worlds dangling in uncertainty. Marta Lopez stepped back from the encroaching crowd, her heart pounding against her chest like a drum. The feel of the sun beating down was overshadowed by the weight of urgency pressing down on her shoulders. Caleb and Lyra had gone into the Iron Spire. The fate of Rust Creek and Elendor hung by a thin thread, and she needed to keep the townsfolk from unraveling that thread. "Listen up," she shouted, her authoritative voice cutting through the murmurs and restless shifting. "We've had some disturbances, nothing to panic over. Just a little technical work happening. But could they buy it?" The inquiries from Howell and others loomed like a storm cloud, growing darker by the minute. "Technical work," Howell barked, stepping forward with furrowed brows. "What kind of work requires all the secrecy, Sheriff?" Her fists clenched at her sides as she faced him. Suspicion crackled in the air, and with every second she could feel the townsfolk's awareness tightening, threatening to breach the carefully constructed facade she had built. If they discovered the portal, if they learned about Malric's creatures, it would mean chaos. "Your usual ranch malfunction, Howell," she deflected, attempting to sound casual, but her stomach twisted. "Nothing more. I'll let you know if anything's truly amiss." But how long could she keep that up? The horizon beyond Caleb's shop felt dangerously close, the sound of rustling leaves and distant animal cries telling her something more sinister loomed just outside the fragile bubble of normalcy she tried to maintain. Then she heard it, a deep rumbling, like thunder rolling in from the heavens. It wasn't a storm, it was worse. The ground vibrated beneath her feet. She leaned on the porch railing, steadied herself, and forced her voice steady. "Everyone, return to your homes, now. Nothing to see here. I'll handle it." "Handle it?" Howell pressed, eyes narrowing. "What do you mean, handle it? The last time you said that—" "Damn it, Howell," she snapped, her patience wearing thin. "I'm telling you for your own good. You want to stand around while everything around us collapses?" That seemed to pierce through the tension. Hesitation flickered among the townsfolk. The whispers dropped to an anxious silence. Yet, Marta knew that a single moment of indecision could escalate into panic. She glanced quickly toward the direction of the spire, imagining Caleb and Lyra desperately fighting against the instability of the core. In that moment, the urgency of her task solidified. She had to control this situation, both for their sake and for those gathered here, oblivious to the magical danger lurking at their doorstep. A sudden force of resolve gripped her, and she took a step forward, her voice lowering, yet resolute. "You all trust me. You know me. I need you to help me keep this town safe, and I need you to do it without asking questions." The murmurs rose again, but she forged ahead, galvanizing herself in the moment. "If anyone steps out of line or goes poking their noses where they don't belong, I will have to take matters into my own hands. Understood?" The crowd hesitated, glancing between one another. Initially resistant, they began to disperse, the murmurings turning into lower tones, some still unsure but adhering to her authority. As the murmurs faded, the ground beneath her quaked again, and instinctively she turned her head toward the visible shimmer of reality distorting by the edges of the ranch. Every tremor echoed a reminder. Malric's encroachment continued. They needed to finish the protocol, needed to thwart whatever chaos this ripple in their worlds would unleash. "I need to cover their escape," Marta muttered under her breath, transforming her resolve into action. She spun on her heel, scanning the gathering, preparing to push the townsfolk back toward their homes. Every fiber of her being screamed that she had to maintain secrecy while Caleb and Lyra faced fate within the spire. With one last commanding glance at the crowd, she raised her voice. "Back to your homes now. I'll let you know when the danger has passed." As she directed them to safety, the ground trembled ominously again beneath her, fueling her urgency. The energy radiating from the core echoed in the distance, and she couldn't shake the feeling of imminent crisis. They were running out of time, and every detail now mattered. Taking a deep breath, she moved forward, her heart pounding not just with fear, but a fierce determination to protect her community. If she had to shield the truth with her very life, she would. The shadows of suspicion loomed behind her, but she wouldn't stumble. Too much was at stake. With every step, she felt the weight of the ground trembling beneath and knew she had to act decisively. The fate of both worlds depended on it. The air in the core chamber crackled with an unsettling energy, the soft hum of the ranch rhythm barely audible amidst surging waves of chaotic ether. Lyra strained to focus, her heart racing, acutely aware of Caleb's presence beside her, his solid form a grounding anchor against the mounting chaos. The vestiges of their plan felt fragile, like the flickering wards lining the chamber's walls, unstable and unreliable. "Caleb!" she shouted, her voice nearly lost in the rising uproar. Colors danced wildly around them as the core's energy pulsed, a blinding light sweeping over them like a tide. "We have to stay in sync. Now." He nodded, his expression resolute, but she could see it, the flicker of doubt lingering in his eyes as he wrestled with what had to come next. This was it, the moment that would either save both worlds or bind him to Elindor forever. Just stay focused on the hum, Lyra continued, the urgency in her tone sharpening. I'll match your rhythm with the resonance coil. We have to make this work together. The ground beneath them trembled violently, and she felt a jolt of panic claw up her throat. The eruption had begun in earnest. Behind her, the entrance to the chamber shuddered as Malric's desperate attempts to re-establish control echoed in the air. Lyra! Caleb's breath hitched, and she saw him pull back, a fleeting hesitation in his movement. What if— No, you can't pull away now, she rushed to his side, gripping his arm tightly. This is our chance. You said you'd face it with me. We need each other, now more than ever. His eyes searched hers, fear and determination warring within him. She felt it too, a gnawing dread, but it fueled her resolve. This wasn't just about survival. This was about connection, about what they would save for those they loved. The core's pulse shuddered again, a brilliant explosion of raw energy cascading upward, threatening to engulf them. The walls vibrated, imbued with the essence of their worlds colliding. Remember the ranch, she cried out, channeling every ounce of her strength into that simple image. The hum, it's your key. Let it resonate through the coil. Caleb swallowed hard, the conflict within him settling into a fierce determination. His hand moved instinctively to the resonance coil, fingers brushing over its surface, aligning to the cadence of the ranch hum they'd harnessed together. Let's do it, he shouted, conviction flooding his voice. As he connected the coil, the hum echoed, cascading through the chamber like a wave of light, grounding the chaotic eruption below their feet. A bright flare erupted from the core, and with a surge of energy that felt like a storm breaking, Caleb took the final step. I'm severing my tether. No! Panic swelled within her, but before she could intervene, she felt the pulse of his decision. He grasped her hand firmly, the bond between them tangible, a lifeline spun from shared resolve. The world's fabric strained and cracked, a chorus of their fates intertwining in that moment. For both of us, he declared, his voice fierce, unwavering. As Caleb cut his connection to Earth, an eruption of vibrant energy enveloped them, blinding her. Then, silence. In the midst of the radiant chaos, Lyra grasped Caleb's hand tighter, feeling both fear and a burgeoning hope. They had done it. He had taken the leap for them, for both worlds. But as they hovered on the brink of the reset, she could sense Malric's looming threat, a storm yet to break. The transient peace shattered as the core stabilized, though darkness coiled at its edges. The immediate danger was far from over, a dread anticipation coiling in her gut. They stood at the precipice, the promise of the protocol hanging between them like an unspoken question. Ready for whatever comes next, she breathed, knowing full well that the fight was only just beginning. Chapter 18. After the Storm. Caleb Ward stood at the edge of a vast, altered Elindor, the sun rising hesitantly over the horizon, casting an otherworldly glow on the landscape. The air felt different, too, charged with a stillness that vibrated with the remnants of magic now streaming back into their world. He ran a hand through his grease-stained hair, reminding himself that he was no longer the mechanic from Rust Creek. He was here to help rebuild the world, and the weight of that responsibility pressed against him like a heavy mantle. The remnants of the battle lay scattered before him: charred earth, the remains of Ukshan, and the deeply etched lines left by the recent chaotic energy surge. He had disrupted that system, selflessly or foolishly, it wasn't clear to him yet. But the core had stabilized. It should have felt triumphant. Instead, it simmered within him, a timid victory tainted by uncertainty. What now? He muttered under his breath, eyes landing on Lyra Thane, who was deep in a conversation with some of Elendor's residents. Her hands gestured animatedly, her tattoos glistening under the emerging sunlight, even as she bore the weight of their collective trauma. They had succeeded in securing a fragile peace, yet all he could think of was home, of rusted tools and familiar faces, of the ranch he now could never return to. He had chained himself to this world by choice, but what did that mean? As he took a step closer, he peered over at the group of locals, who clustered by a skeletal frame of what once had been a mage lamp outpost. Hope was a strange entity. It filled the cracks of destruction, but what kind of hope would they build? And where was his place within it? A deep breath steadied him, but the doubt lingered. It haunted him, whispering that he was not meant to belong here, that he had inadvertently harmed the life he sought to protect by severing his earth tether. His chest tightened with the familiar pang of isolation. The sensation that once held him back in Rust Creek was creeping back. If he failed to connect meaningfully with the aftermath of his sacrifice, what would be left for him? Would he drift like a ghost through a world that was never his own? Caleb! Lyra's voice broke through his reverie, cutting like a blade through fog. She beckoned him over. We're discussing how to restart the mage lamps, together. I know you have ideas. You proved them during the fight. He hesitated, every instinct urging him to retreat into the shadows. But then he saw her piercing green eyes, filled with confidence and challenge, and a spark flared in his chest. Maybe he hadn't just made a choice to be here. Maybe he had the power to help mold this new world. Right. His voice grew steadier as he drew closer to her and the others. We need to focus on synergy. How about syncing the resonance with the ley lines? If we can harness the patterns, it might reactivate the lamps. Caleb felt the tension ease among the group, the tentative hope shifting to eager curiosity. They were looking at him, at his ideas, and in that moment, the flickers of loss began to fade. Maybe he could make a real difference. He stepped into the middle of the circle, leaning in, waving off the doubts clinging to him like shadowy vines. We could configure the coils from the way station alongside the ley connections. If we map it out, we can guide the energy right back into its core. The designs unfolded as he spoke, forming new shapes in their minds, and as their focus sharpened, the chatter of plans morphed into a collaborative dance of trust and creativity. Caleb realized that this, sharing his skills and insights, was what he had longed for in Rust Creek but had never found. A warmth built in his chest, unraveling the knots of uncertainty that had haunted him. He was not just a mechanic anymore. He was Caleb Ward, an essential piece of this intricate puzzle. And what he did next mattered. As the sun climbed higher, casting golden light over the rebirth of Elendor, he drew the residents closer, preparing to lead a gathering. There was urgency in his resolve, a commitment to forge this world with them. Let's map our future, he declared, and for the first time, the echo of his own voice felt truly grounded, rooted in the blessings of both worlds. With a decisive nod, he knew they would rebuild together, crafting bridges that would honor the past while reshaping their destinies anew. Behind him, the thrum of the still-growing connection began as a promise, a saga yet to unfold. Marta Lopez planted both boots on the cracked flagstones of Rust Creek Square and let the town look at her. Morning light picked out the silver at her temples. Beneath it, the old hum was a steady undercurrent in the dirt, now a thing everyone could feel in their teeth. People had come down from their porches and trucks, faces pulled tight between suspicion and whatever they hoped she could deliver. The courthouse steps were crowded. Children clung to ankles. A dog barked once and then went quiet as a tremor rolled through the ground and rattled the sign above the door. "All right," Marta said, voice cutting through the low talk. She kept her hands on her hips because it steadied her, because she'd learned the town needed to see the sheriff stand solid. We've got confirmed tremors along the south edge of the ward place. Some damage to fences and outbuildings. I need everybody calm and sensible while we sort it. A man from the back, Howell, always the first fire to flare, spat the question everyone else was thinking. Sort it? Or cover for them? Why can't we go see for ourselves, Marta? You're holding stuff back. Marta met his eyes. There were lines of defiance and fear in them that had nothing to do with her. Hal, I ain't hiding nothing from you. Listen, if there's something out there that's dangerous, we don't poke it unprepared. You remember what happened when Ramos went out on that call alone? The name hung in the air like a hot coal. She hadn't said it to shame anyone, only to remind them that reckless answers cost lives. We keep people safe, or there won't be anyone left to answer questions. A scrape of boots. Caleb Ward stepped out of his shop with the heavy gait of a man used to carrying more than his share. He had a toolbox over one shoulder. A coil of copper tucked against it caught the sun and flashed like a promise. Marta had known Caleb long enough to see what the sight did to the crowd, steadying more than she could. He came up the street and stood beside her at the railing, shoulders level, not looking for credit. We woke something under the south pasture, Caleb said plainly into the hush. It's messing with lay flow and our power systems. Lyra's been going over it with me. It's real, and it's getting worse. We need to stabilize that ground and check the substation feeds before anything else goes wrong. Murmurs moved through the crowd, less hot now, more like people passing a radio signal. A woman near the steps clutched her child and asked the question that mattered. What do we do? Caleb wiped grease on his jeans and pointed down the road toward the ranch. Load what you can. Drivers, trucks, and trailers. Bring chains and straps. We'll haul coils, check lines, and shore up anything loose. Anyone who can lift, haul, or watch a rig, step up. Hands went up. Mrs. Henderson, who had never missed a town meeting in 20 years, pushed forward. I'll bring my truck and chain hooks. Start at first light on the south fence. Marta felt the tightness in her chest loosen with every offer. It wasn't relief, she didn't indulge in relief, but a shift, suspicion cracking into purpose. She could marshal that. Good, Deputy Ramos is coordinating shifts. No one goes to the ranch unless they're assigned. We're doing sweep checks at dusk and a rolling watch on the substation. If you're on a team, report to the diner in 10 minutes. If you're not, keep your distance. Poking around without a plan will get you killed, and I won't have that on me. Howell wasn't finished. He stepped closer, voice raised where everyone could hear. So we just sit and wait while whatever it is spreads? Aren't we supposed to protect our own? We are, Marta said, and the authority in her voice had teeth. Protecting our own means working smart. If y'all want answers, we'll get them together. Organized, accounted for. If you want chaos, go off alone and see how that works out. She let the edge sit long enough that it registered. Another tremor hit, sharper this time. The courthouse sign banged, and a gust of dust rose along the street. People flinched. A child began to cry, and a woman shushed her with an unsteady laugh. Marta heard the old voices in her head. The deputy she'd lost, the nights of paperwork, the calls she'd taken that left her stomach hollow. She thought of the town as a machine, small parts, all of them necessary. She was the one who had to keep the gears aligned. All right, she said more softly, then firmer. We make teams. Get me a driver, 2 hands for hauling, someone who knows power. Caleb, coordinate with Ramos and the substation crew. I'll put out a bulletin saying we're mobilizing to secure structures and stabilize power feeds. No pictures, no online posts. We keep this on our channels until we have facts. Caleb nodded once. He moved through the crowd, quiet, efficient, taking names, assigning trucks, pointing people toward trucks and tools. The small motions added to the chorus of purpose. Straps being fetched, a teenager starting a generator, the clink of chains. Marta felt the mood in the square tilt. Skepticism receded into the background and made room for action. She let herself notice it, the way neighbors offered what they had without waiting for orders, the way even Howell chewed on his retort and then handed her a list of men with flatbed experience. Responsibility that had been heavy on her began to feel like something she could carry. "Meet at the diner in 10, she said again, smoothing the plan into place. "Bring what you can. If anything changes, we'll shut it down and reroute resources." And she caught the eyes of the mothers near the steps. "If you have folks who need help getting to the diner, let Deputy Ramos know. We move as a town." As the crowd began to break, the chatter turned to logistics instead of rumor. Caleb hefted his toolbox, shoulders straight, and walked back toward his shop with a small knot of volunteers behind him. Marta watched them go, rigs and hands, not panic. She dug her notebook from her coat, fingers steady now, and started listing assignments. Ramos's patrol windows, the substation contact who'd haul coils first. The tremor underfoot came again, but this time it felt less like a threat and more like a drumbeat calling them to work. If Rust Creek could pull itself together, if she could hold them to their sense and not their fear, then maybe they'd get through this without losing more than fences and sleep. Marta squared her shoulders, put the note in her pocket, and set off toward the diner to run the plan. Behind her, the town moved into motion, organized and wary, rallying around Caleb's project and the promise that they would face whatever came as one. This title was narrated with virtual voice.